this meeting to order of the July 28th board meeting for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. I want to remind everyone to make sure that you're aware, as in the past, that this meeting is being broadcast via the internet. So at any point, any of us, including some of you in the audience, can be visible to anyone watching online. As we've seen in the press recently, that's probably a good idea to just behave yourselves, you know. Also, as a reminder, if you would, please silence your cell phones. My name is Harold Hahn. I'm Vice Chairman of the Coordinating Board. Today is a very special day, as you'll note, as we go through the agenda. Mr. Heldenfeld was unable to be with us today. His wife is recovering from some maladies, and we wish her all Godspeed in getting well. Just a notation as far as the April of 2012 board meeting. Please note that we're changing that meeting, April of 2012, Committee on Agency Operations, and the board meeting to April 24th and 25th. That will be a Tuesday and a Wednesday. This will not be the only reminder of this change. You will receive numerous reminders between now and April 2012. Just a couple of items to bring you up to speed on some of the activities of the Coordinating Board. Our Higher Education Leadership Conference will be held in Austin on November 3rd and 4th at the Renaissance Hotel. As in the past, the conference will bring together regents, trustees, chancellors, presidents, and other interested education leaders to gather information and discuss issues of shared interest. It will begin on November 3rd with the annual State of Higher Education Luncheon and our annual Texas Higher Education Star Award ceremony. The luncheon will feature our 2011 Star Award finalists and keynote addresses by none other than Commissioner Raymond Paredes and Dr. Vincent Tinto, Distinguished Professor of Education at Syracuse University. Star Award winners will be announced at the luncheon, conference session, and a special leadership dinner will continue on November 3rd. The governing board orientation sessions are scheduled to begin at 8 a.m. on November 4th and will end at 2 p.m. for university regents. To meet the new legislatively mandated training for community college governing board members, orientation sessions for community college trustees will continue until 4:45 p.m. While these sessions will satisfy the training requirements for newly appointed regents and elected trustees, many tenured regents and trustees also find them to be helpful, and of course you will be welcome. We also have a special conference plan for the teams up to 5 faculty staff members from each of our public higher education institutions to attend the Reinventing Instruction and Learning Conference on November 2nd and 3rd in Austin. This conference will be held at the Renaissance Hotel and will be an opportunity for faculty, administrators, and staff to discuss the challenges facing undergraduate teaching and learning excellence. The conference will be used to create a statewide dialogue about innovative practices in undergraduate teaching and learning. More information will follow towards that. If you have any information, of course, you can, or if you need any information, you can contact the coordinating board. We do have kind of bittersweet. We have 3 of our board members that this will be their last official meeting, and we want to make sure that we recognize them for their contributions. The first is Mr. Joe Hinton. Joe, I can tell you that although I've been on the board a short period of time, It just amazes me that the insight and depth that you have in issues, and from what all of your fellow board members tell me, as well as staff, you've been very instrumental in rising to the occasion of making certain that we're doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. But I'd like to read this resolution. Joe Hinton, whereas Mr. Joe B. Hinton was appointed to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board by Governor Rick Perry on January 23, 2006, and whereas during his years of service with the Coordinating Board, Mr. Hinton served with great distinction and dedication as Chair of Agency Operations Committee, a member of the Committee on Academic Excellence and Research, and a member of the Committee on Participation and Success. And whereas Mr. Hinton's knowledge and experience contributed to ensuring the board focused on its fiduciary responsibilities, and whereas the board benefited greatly from Mr. Hinton's business expertise and leadership in advancing an ad hoc audit committee, which resulted in creating an environment of continuous improvement that led to a series of clean audit opinions by external auditors. And whereas Mr. Hinton's efforts will continue to benefit the state because of his work in and the commitment to transparency and accountability in agency operations. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board on this 28th day of July 2011 express our deepest appreciation to Mr. Joe B. Hinton for his distinguished service as an influential member of this board and his unwavering dedication to higher education for all of the people of Texas. And be it further resolved that the resolution be included in the minutes, and that a copy of this resolution signed by the members of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board be presented to Mr. Hinton in recognition of the high esteem in which he is held. Mr. Hinton.
Thank you very much, Darrell. I thought you were talking about somebody else.
Turn your mic on.
Okay, now it's on. Yeah, as I said, I thought you were talking about somebody else. I didn't realize that was me. And it's been a pleasure working with the board and with the staff here for 6 years. This makes 12 years now. I've been working for the state of Texas for 0. So at any rate, I was telling the guys last night, I found out that after 12 years of working for the state, I have the right to a tomb at the Austin Cemetery, State of Texas Cemetery. So I thought that was pretty impressive. Too bad. Too bad there are a lot of people who like to see me use it too, I think. but nonetheless, this has been an experience and a half and a lot of fun. At the same time, there was an awful lot of work, but we had a lot of good people in the staff. and this is what, our second board or our third board, I guess, because we had good people all the way, and it was a pleasure, and it was easy to work with you. And I thank you very much, and I thank you very much for the kind words.
Give him a hand, ladies and gentlemen. We might have started chanting 6 more years, but I don't think it would have done any good.
I can't stand a divorce.
Yeah.
Another appointment, I think that's about what I did.
Okay, next, we want to recognize Whit Ryder. Whit, again, has been one of those mentors that I've seen. When I first got on the board, he gave me some very good advice. Last night at a dinner, he also gave us some additional advice when Durga asked him, well, you know, what are 2 of the things that you would tell us as board members? And rather than going into the whole story, I'll just say that Whit said, keep your mouth shut and your ears open. And that's probably good advice for all of us. But as far as the resolution, whereas A.W. Whit Ryder III was appointed to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board by Governor Rick Perry on July 22, 2004, and whereas during his 7 years of dedicated service with the board, Mr. Ryder served with great distinction and dedication as chair and vice chair of the board, Chair and member of the Committee on Participation and Success, Chair and member of the Committee on Agency Operations, and member of the Committees on Strategic Planning and Policy, Planning, Campus Planning, and Research Programs. And whereas Mr. Ryder was instrumental during the development of the adoption of the Texas College and Career Readiness Standards, the board's strategic planning process, which resulted in the short-term accelerated plan for the Closing the Gaps by 2015, and the long-term vision for national and international excellence in Texas higher education, the development of policy recommendations relating to the Texas Grant Program and outcomes-based funding for higher education institution, and the launch of the Generation Texas campaign, the grassroots campaign to create a college and workforce ready culture in every school in Texas. And whereas Mr. Ryder has earned the admiration and respect of his colleagues at the coordinating board and the institutions of higher education, his dedication, collegiality, enthusiasm, professionalism, and hard work, and now therefore be it resolved that the members of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board on this 28th day of July 2011 express our deepest appreciation to A.W. Whit Ryder III for his distinguished service as an influential member of this board and his unwavering dedication to higher education for all the people of Texas. And be it further resolved that the resolution be included in the minutes and that a copy of the resolution signed by the members of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board be presented to Mr. Ryder in recognition of the high esteem in which he is held. Mr. Ryder.
Thanks, Harold. I won't say much. I just want to, I'm humbled by everything in there. For me, it has really been an honor and a privilege. I'd say, first of all, to the institutions, I can't name every one of you by name. The faces have changed over 7 years, but I will tell you, to the institutions, I've never seen such a committed group of people that have been committed to the students in the state of Texas. And we have not always agreed, but the great thing is we have always met in the middle, and I feel like y'all have brought great leadership to the state, and it's been an honor and privilege really for me to work with each of you. To the board, there's a lot of new faces around the board. I really wish Fred were here today. Fred is really one of my dear friends, and that's a great example of what this board can do. Over 7 years, it's given me an opportunity that probably I never would have had to develop relationships around the state. And people like Bob Shepard, Neil Smith, Lorraine Perryman, I could go on. Just absolutely great people who I would have never been able to meet. And it's been great to watch their leadership and to learn from their leadership. And then last and not least, the staff always knows this, the staff, and I said it yesterday, they are the absolute best in any state agency. I think the world of them. They have always demonstrated great professionalism, but more than that, a real commitment to the state and the students of Texas. So to each of you, the good thing is I'm still on the College for All Texans board. They're not kicking me off that. And I'm hoping we schedule those board meetings on these same board meetings so that I can sit back there in the back and listen next time. But to each of you, it's been an honor and a privilege, and I thank you for this recognition today. So.
Thank you, Whit. We have one final board member who is unable to attend today's meeting. It's Dr. Lynn Bracewell Phillips, and I'll read the resolution. Whereas Dr. Lynn Bracewell Phillips was appointed to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board by Governor Rick Perry on November 1st, 2005, and whereas during her tenure with the Coordinating Board, Dr. Phillips served with great distinction and dedication as chair and member of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Policy, chair of the Committee on Academic Excellence and Research, vice chair and member of the Committee on Participation and Success, member of the Committee on Agency Operations, and member of the Committee on Closing the Gaps. And whereas Dr. Phillips' passion for every student was evident in her insistence that students be treated as individuals and not as a group, And whereas Dr. Phillips' efforts in increasing student success are reflected in the development of the college and career readiness standards and the board's increased focus on educator quality, recruitment, and retention in the accelerated plan for closing the gaps. And whereas the board and staff benefited from Dr. Phillips' knowledge and understanding of teaching and its vital role to the future of our state, and whereas Dr. Phillips was instrumental in the initiation of the grassroots campaign, Generation Texas, to create a college-going and workforce-ready culture in every school in Texas, and whereas her thoughtful insights and deep passion for education contributed greatly to board discussions and activities, and now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board on this 28th day of July 2011 express our deepest appreciation to Dr. Lynn Bracewell Phillips for her distinguished service as an influential member of this board and her unwavering dedication to higher education for all the people of Texas, and be it further resolved that the resolution be included in the minutes and that a copy of the resolution signed by the members of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board be presented to Dr. Phillips in recognition of the high esteem in which she is held. Lynn is not here today. Whit, can you tell us a little bit about working with Lynn?
Yeah, I will just, Lynn had brought interesting background. She was the smartest one of us on the board for 6 years. She was a PhD. So when we always looked at doctoral programs and we couldn't even quite understand what the program was they were talking about, Lynn did a great job. But Lynn is, I will tell you, has been tireless. When I think back to the last 4 years and we started talking about college readiness and talking about the importance of making sure that our high school graduates are prepared and college ready, she was really leading the charge of that. She and Lori Bricker were partners in crime, and many of y'all in the audience know that, and we made great strides as we worked on college readiness and started talking about the success initiatives. And I'm going to miss her also dearly. She's got a back problem today, and so sitting up here for 7 hours will probably be very difficult for her, but I wish her the best, and as I said, she has brought so much to this board, and I think shares my comments in really recognizing the commissioner and the leadership and the staff here in terms of all the work that they've done with her. So,
very good. One little known fact, Lynn did give me a ride to the airport one day, and I think she possibly is a latent NASCAR driver, but we will certainly miss her. Okay. We do have 2 new board members today that I'm very happy about. I'm pleased to introduce both of them. First is Amir Barzin. Okay, I'm from West Texas, Amir, so our student board member, Amir, was appointed to a 1-year term by Governor Rick Perry effective June 1st, 2011. Amir serves on the Committee on Strategic Planning and Policy. He is working towards a Doctor of Osteopathy degree at the University of North Texas. Science Center's Texas College of Osteopathy Medicine. Amir, would you like to make a few comments?
Sure. First and foremost, I really want to thank everyone for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to serving on the board. I would hope that I could give a little bit of the students' perspective on this, and I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to working with everyone. Thank you.
We're very glad to have you, Amir. James H. Lee is our newest board member. Jim is the president of JHL Capital Holdings in Houston. He served as a trustee and chairman of the board of the Teacher Retirement System of Texas, as a trustee of the Texas Growth Fund, and as a member of the Finance Commission of Texas. Mr. Lee serves on the boards of Texans for a Better America, the UT Health Development Board in Houston, and is chairman emeritus of the Maverick PAC. Jim, would you like to make a few comments?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all. as you can hear from the outgoing comments from Whit and Joe and the accolades for Dr. Phillips, these are mighty large shoes to fill. And we're very humbled by it. We're just getting up to speed. We've had a great orientation with the commissioner and the deputy commissioners and staff, and we're getting up to speed. I think we're finding our way around the building and through the volume of books here. But we're excited about this, and actually I have the potential of being the board member with the shortest term, in that my term expires here at the end of August. And if I perform well today, maybe I'll be fortunate enough to be reappointed and see you all again in September. But I'm very much excited about it, and thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Chairman.
Glad to have you. I would like to also recognize Interim Chancellor Jay Kimbrough of the Texas A&M University System. Chancellor, you here?
Not yet.
Well, we'll get him later then. 2 interim positions have been filled. Their transition dates are, let's see, after the meeting, Philip D. Castile is the sole finalist with the University of Houston, Victoria. They must be down at Starbucks. Ronald A. D. Pinho, is that correct? Is the incoming president with the UT MD Anderson Cancer Center. Okie dokie. Well, I know one guy's here, and he's a provost from University of Texas at El Paso, Junius Gonzalez. There, we got one. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Okay, next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the April board meeting and the June special call board meeting. Do I have a motion for the approval of these minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. This time we would like to recognize Representative Sergio Munoz from Hidalgo County's a state representative from District 36. You'd like to speak to item J. I believe that's 8. That's correct, 8J. It is on the consent calendar, but Representative Munoz would still like to say a few items. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Representative, glad to have you here this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And really, I just want to thank the Commissioner Paredes and also the board members for their consideration of South Texas College's application for a new Bachelor of Applied Technology program in Medical and Health Services Management. And it was really a work in progress and a partnership not only between STC but also between UTPA and Dr. Nelson, who have had a great relationship in terms of working together for the prosperity of South Texas, because it's not only working for our county, but we're working for a region, which in turn is going to benefit the state. So we really want to thank you for your careful consideration, and please know that this program is going to continue to increase the earning potential and improve the quality of life for people in deep South Texas, which in turn, of course, is going to benefit the rest of the state. So we're really grateful for your consideration. We want to thank you and let you know that we're here to continue to work together and work with you in improving our education and opportunities for everybody here in the state of Texas. So I just want to thank you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Representative. You know, if you happen to come up with any extra money, we could use it in the education area.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a comment? Representative, as yourself, and as you have to oftentimes in your position, make real tough choices and real tough decisions.
Sure.
And likewise, I think we're put in that position also at times. I think very seldom do I speak on behalf of the board, but I'm going to take this opportunity to do so at this time if the board will allow me.
Sure.
This was an easy one to make.
Oh, okay.
It was a no-brainer.
Okay.
Clearly, it was the preparation and the work that was done by that institution was stellar in every aspect that I could see. It was put together very well, Our staff reviewed it, made a positive recommendation. Our commissioner also made a positive recommendation, and as well as our chairman of our board here. So it was, I want to, on behalf of myself and the board, say job well done.
Thank you very much. And like I said, it has
Pass
been...
that along to the people down there for us.
No, we will, and we're very grateful for STC and UTPA, especially in the Valley, because it really has given the opportunity for a lot of our students to get their higher education. And I know this program is going to lead them down the same path and improve the quality of life for a lot of our students, a lot of our families that live down there, and people that just want the opportunity to get ahead. So.
I particularly have an interest as a practitioner and as a healthcare provider, and knowing the shortage of trained people, particularly in that area of coding and medical management, and the program was well chosen. Those graduates will have no problems at all finding jobs and work, and those are the type of programs that I think this board really likes to see brought before it, where students can go, get an education, and get out and find a job. And as you said, very, very eloquently, is raise the standard of life and living for themselves and their family.
Well,
thank you for being here today, sir.
No, thank you all. And like I said, I think the work continues in terms of working with our own business community and having a trained and ready workforce, especially for bringing more prosperity to the area. And this will lead us down that path. So,
I'd have one other recommendation for that particular institution, as well as any of the other institutions that are here today. Go find us some more programs like that and bring them to us.
Well, on behalf of the over 30,000 students that are enrolled at STC in general, we're very grateful and look forward to work with you all. And I know there's going to be many more opportunities down the line, not only with this board, but in the state in general, and we want to do our part to contribute to that. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay. Is Shirley Reed here? Stand up, Shirley. Good program. Congratulations.
It was my first time being here, so very interesting getting to know different people. I know I've met Commissioner Paredes before, but if you know, we're here to serve you all, and I know we represent different districts, but I think at the end of the day, we're all collectively trying to do the best thing for the state. So I want you to know that I'm here to help you all as well.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you, Representative.
Thank you very much. You all have a good day, and God bless you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar for the entire meeting. The consent calendar includes non-controversial items that we think can be approved without comment or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need more of our attention. Of course, any board member can request that an agenda item be removed from the consent calendar. That gives us the opportunity to discuss it later in the meeting. Does any board member want to remove another item or items from the consent calendar? All right. If there are no additions or deletions, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Is there a second? Yes. Okay, thank you, Durga. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. The next item on our agenda is the major policy discussion, agenda item 4. This is our major policy discussion. First, Susan Brown, Assistant Commissioner of Planning and Accountability, will give us an update on the annual Closing the Gaps by 2015 progress report, and then Raymond Paredes, Commissioner of Higher Education, and David Gardner, Deputy Commissioner of Academic Planning and Policy, will lead the discussion on how Texas can achieve the goals of closing the gaps with diminishing resources. Susan.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to step through some of this very closely because a lot of it has are things that you've seen along the way. Next slide. And technology helps us again. We're going to go through actually 3 different presentations kind of all pulled together. The first one's going to be the progress report, and then we're going to talk about the financial challenges that we face given the current budget situation. And then the commissioner's going to talk about, and David will be talking about, where do we go from here and how do we get to where we want to be. Next slide. We are actually very well on track to meet our Closing the Gaps target of 630,000, an increase of 630,000. We're at 1.5 million students now, and the target for 2010 was actually 1.4, so we are on track to meet our overall target. We still lag in some areas.
I don't think your mic is on.
Hello?
Yes.
I'll just pull it a little closer. The Hispanic enrollment has made some gains. However, we're still slightly below. And some of you may notice that this number is a little different than what's in the report. We're going to fix it. We had some institutions with the ethnic code changes that didn't quite get their numbers right and had everybody listed as unknown. So these numbers are actually a little bit higher now that we got that fixed, and we'll be changing the report to reflect those changes. But we're doing well. And African American, we're well above where the target was. And then the next slide shows you the discrepancies we have. For African American, we're well above, but if you look at this slide, the line shows that for African American females, they're participating at 8.1% of the population, where African American males are actually only at 5%. The same holds true for Hispanic, but not quite to as large a degree. And actually the same also holds true for the white males. Males are just not participating at the same rate as the females. This is a national trend, but it's definitely an area of concern and something that we're working with to try and make some improvements into that area. And this was one of the focuses, or is one of the focuses of the Accelerated Action Plan, is to make sure that we can get more males enrolled. Moving on to the success target, we're actually a little bit above our target for 2010, and that's just slightly, and this is for bachelor's, associate's degrees, and certificates only. We don't talk about the graduate programs as much here. This is an interesting slide because when you look at the African American participation, we are above the target. However, African American success is actually below the target line. So that is something where we need to work on persistence. You'll hear us talk a lot about the outcomes-based funding, all these different things. And that is to help get those populations that are enrolling, but they're never completing, to help get those through the pipeline and to get them to succeed. Okay, Hispanics, we have the same thing. They're below on the participation, but they're also below for success. And this is where we keep talking about outcomes and we keep talking about success and persistence. You'll hear that over and over and over again. Gender differences holds true for the success. Even for, if you look at those that enter, the males are not graduating at the same rate as the females in any category. This is the university baccalaureate graduation rate. Next one. And this is for the associate and certificates. It's a little closer together, but it's still not where we want it to be, and it's not at the same level. The males are not persisting as well as the females. There's also a couple of other areas that we've talked about a lot. They're in the Accelerated Action Plan. There are areas where we really need to concentrate. One is the STEM. That is an economic driver. It's engineering, computer science, physical sciences, and math. That's how it's defined. We have made a little bit of progress in engineering, but we've actually had some declines in computer science. So there also was a TG just announced a $25 million contribution for the T-STEM Challenge Scholarship Program. So hopefully that will help spur some increase in this area.
It's also important to note that that's focused on community. It's focused on community college students, and so that's an area where we have the opportunity to get people quickly into the workforce through not only associate degrees, but through certificate programs in a short period of time. So that was an important approach identified by the governor's office and supported by TG.
The next area is teacher education, initial certifications, and the math and science teachers. As we move, back up the slide. Back. No, just, okay, it won't let you back up. Right there. So one of the things that we've noticed, and obviously in the newspaper, a lot of students are hearing about layoffs, teacher layoffs, and that sort of thing. So we think that part of this might be the teacher certification is an extra step on top of graduating. You graduate, then you have to pass your teacher certification, you have to get fingerprinted, you have to do a lot of these sort of things. We're kind of afraid that part of this has to do with that the students aren't making that extra step to get certified and that sort of thing. So we're looking into that some more, but we don't have any good, there's not really a good way without surveying all the students graduating that we think would have been teachers to see if that is part of the downturn. But we're hoping that that's all it is, and that maybe, as things pick up, that we'll see those teachers enrolling some more. We're graduating. On the excellence side, we still have challenges. This has been one that has been very hard to define. It's, it gets back to the old adage of, well, I'll recognize excellence when I see it. It's hard to get a numeric count for the excellence. Obviously, there's been a lot of work done with TRIP, with the National Research University funding, and Texas State. We also have some really good campuses. The Texas State system has improved graduation rates and undergraduate retention. Every year we award those STAR awards to institutions who are really doing well, and you've heard from some of those. You're going to be hearing from UT Dallas earlier, or a little bit right after this, on their lean process. So there are things that are happening, and we try to highlight those at each board member with the excellence portion of the recognition. This is not the target or the goal. The goal talks about federal research obligations. The federal government has not put out any new numbers since over a year ago on the federal obligations. So I'm going to show you, we're increasing our research expenditures. It's not exactly the same measure, but we don't have any new data. The federal government hasn't put out anything new. So I'm going to just show you where we are increasing. And this kind of is the end of the closing the gaps portion. So does anybody have any questions about any of this? Or I know I've stepped through it pretty quickly.
Let me clarify that the research expenditures, while not the goal, is a target for the plan. And I think for the new board members, it's important to note that while we've made huge progress and we still have some work to do, but when we reach these goals in 2015, which we're committed to doing, that doesn't mean we're where we need to be. We'll still have more work to do, and we'll be focusing more on being really even more competitive in the U.S., but also internationally. So I just want you to bear in mind as we move forward that not only will we be working to achieve those goals by 2015, but we'll also be working to identify what and clarify our goals beyond 2015.
Okay, next slide.
I would just join just saying to the new board members, you'll hear a lot about the accelerated plan. That was a plan that was put in place
2 years ago?
Yeah,
a year
18, 24 months ago. And the reason for that was we saw coming up to 2015, and I'm delighted when I see the participation and success numbers. Those are great numbers, top line numbers. The challenge we've still got is down the Hispanic and African American side in STEM's field. And so the thought was there an accelerated plan that we could put in place for the next 3 years to really try to drive those initiatives to 2015 as we then begin to think beyond closing the gaps, because I think that'll be the challenge for the next board, is really how do we begin thinking beyond 2015 and what it should look like. So, and I'm sure at the commissioner and the other major policy discussion, we'll be talking a little bit about some of those issues, the outcomes-driven measures and the accelerated plan. But when you hear the accelerated plan, that's the gap plan that we put in place between now and 2015 to try to move the needle in these certain areas. So.
Okay, and now we're going to talk about a little bit about the budget. For those that were at the AOC, I know Arturo, Dr. Alonso covered some of this, but we're going to just go through it very briefly. Higher education funding took a hit. I think everybody in the audience and all of y'all know that. GR dedicated funds went down $1.2 million or $2 billion. So, next slide. Formula funding, total reduction of $180 million, and that's just a portion of what actually goes to the institutions. There was no funding for enrollment growth. The coordinating board's recommendation was that we needed to at least fund the growth at the institutions. None of that happened. There was a hold harmless for general academic institutions only, excluding debt service and excluding, so that was one thing. We did not get outcomes-based funding. The funding attached to it passed. However, we did get into legislation through HB 9 the requirement that we study outcomes-based funding, and it was looked at for the community colleges and for the universities. So that is the first step in the right direction. So special item funding for all the institutions was decreased 25%. You'll hear them called the stimulus funds, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Those funds to the tune of $227 million were eliminated and not replaced with GR funding. Higher education group insurance, almost $100 million were reduced. And then the community college retirement benefits, they changed the way they calculated that. That was almost another $100 million. So there were some big cuts over and above what was cut through the formula. So that's something we need to be aware of. Next. Overall, when you look at the total funding, we had 2 institutions that had decreases of over 15%. And that's because the reduction in the tuition revenue bond service payments, they actually had a reduction in those. We had some increases that are 5 to 7%. That gets back to the formulas are an allocation. So if you're growing very rapidly, you're going to get more money versus those who are decreasing their enrollment or holding steady. It's all a proportionate sort of thing. And so for the community colleges, we had 4 districts that were down more than 25%. Anyway, you can read the rest of it. So this is just to show you that there's variation among the institutions on who got what amount of money and how badly they were affected. Go ahead. I'm going to talk a little bit about the coordinating board budget, and that's not something, I mean, you always think of us as a separate entity, but what we do here has a dramatic effect on the institutions. And that's because, as Arturo said yesterday, only about 4.5% of our budget is actually operating budget. The rest of it goes to the institutions or to the students. So financial aid took a 15% reduction. Next slide. These are some of the other programs that took reductions in funding. Advanced research, and that's money that gets passed through to the institution. Nursing shortage reduction took a reduction program took a reduction. So there are a lot of programs that take reductions. Took reductions. And this is what I've been saying, is why does the CB budget matter? That money that passes through to the institutions, when that gets cut, that's an additional cut that the institutions are feeling. And so they're getting, even though they may be programs that not everybody gets, that is less money that the institutions are going to get for their programs. And then I'm going to turn it over to David and the Commissioner to talk about where do we go from here.
Well, thank you, Susan. Maybe, and I might be surprising David by saying this, the first bullet point, institutionalizing a lean culture and continuous improvement, that's actually an area that David has had some responsibility for. And why don't you talk about where we are and talk about the overall state strategy for that?
Yes, I am surprised. As you all know, our chairman in particular, Mr. Heldenfels, has been talking a great deal about the importance of utilizing all our resources as well as possible, as efficiently as possible. And I think it's important to note that when you think about this, because this is an approach that's you hear about most frequently in a business environment, we also have that business environment at our institutions. And so there are elements about this that, of course, focus on that. But part of continuous improvement, we want to emphasize this, is also about the academic enterprise and the way we work with and serve students. And, in fact, it addresses increasing excellence at our institution, having better programs. So I think it's important to note that for everyone here that when you hear the board talking about continuous improvement, this isn't just about saving dollars. It's about using dollars more effectively with the ultimate goal of producing great graduates for the state of Texas and improving our competitiveness nationally. A year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, we had a cost efficiency committee which began meeting in I believe it was December of last year, and we heard from people all across the country and to talk about best practices. And that group issued a report last spring on cost effectiveness in Texas. Some of those we saw through legislation. I think it's important to know that, for example, they talked about things such as making sure students had degree plans. It seems like an obvious thing, but it's not always the case that students have degree plans and they meet with advisors. Part of his efficiency is students taking the right courses, having the courses when they need them, and moving forward. So there's been a great deal of work with that, and we've been working with institutions. And of course, institutions are focused on these things as well. And through the process, we've made sure that we spend time to identify practices that are actually in place at institutions. So I think it's important for everyone to realize that through our Cost Effectiveness Committee, we actually identified some great processes at institutions. In fact, later today, you'll hear in our recognition of excellence what the University of Texas at Dallas has done and some of the savings they've realized through employing a lean process at that institution. And there are many other institutions doing the same thing. As we go forward, we plan to bring together a group of folks to talk essentially about beyond closing the gaps, but as a part of that process, talk about continuous improvement and those things that we need to do. This year, as part of the STAR Award, for the first time, we included a category for essentially improvements in campuses and the various processes, something beyond just the academics, and so we're anticipating we'll be recognizing an institution in that regard as we go forward. But this will be something we're doing, and as Arturo has mentioned, is of course something we're doing internally in the agency as well.
Thank you. Let me quickly go through those other bullet points. As all board members know, one of the striking characteristics of higher education in Texas over the past 10 years has been the extraordinary growth of community colleges. We know that we're seeing a very significant shift in the role of community colleges. There was an article, for example, in the New York Times about a month ago that pointed out that community colleges are now attracting some larger and larger numbers of very high-achieving students. It's not the case, which sometimes is the public perception, that community colleges attract students who either don't have time to attend a university full-time or can't get into universities with selective standards. It is more and more the case that students with very distinguished academic records in high school or in some other area of higher education are going to community colleges simply because they're less expensive. We need to make sure that we build on that strength, and that we need to make sure that we help those students actually complete their programs. We also know that depending on the institution, somewhere between 50 and 80% of community college students do intend to transfer and achieve a baccalaureate degree at some point. So we need to strengthen 2+2 systems. That will be the cornerstone of our emphasis on following up on the governor's mandate to create low-cost degree programs. We will build on a 2+2 strategy. In terms of restructuring student financial aid, I'll simply say that we're confronting two conflicting phenomena in higher education in Texas. First of all, the students that are coming out of the K through 12 system in Texas are now largely poor. By one metric or another, half or more than half of all students graduating from high school are poor. They qualify for Title I benefits, or they have their other characteristics among these students that suggest that they're poor. They won't be able to go to college unless we find some form of financial aid for them. Now, once again, the conflicting phenomenon is that for the first time in the history of the program, funding for Texas Grant was cut. So we have less money to deal with increasing number of needy students. We had 2 days ago the first in a series of discussions with financial aid officers about how we can make our limited financial aid dollars go further. We haven't made any decisions about recommendations to the board, but we are considering, for example, capping Texas Grant awards for a maximum of 4 years. We've talked about raising the standard for academic progress from 12 hours a semester to 30 hours for an academic year. You can do 12, 12, and 6 in the summer. You can do 15 and 15, but any combination that gets you to 30 semester credit hours for the year. We're looking at other ways that we can spread our limited resources more broadly. If we were to do the Texas Grant Program the way we've done it historically, we'd be able to fund about 30% of new students, newly eligible students. And my view, once again, this is something we're checking the data on, but my view is that unless we can fund 50% of eligible new students in one way or another, I don't believe the Texas Grant will be a viable hope for poor students in Texas to incentivize them to go to college. If we're going to fund only a fraction of those eligible, I think a lot of students will say, well, this really doesn't, I can't count on this kind of support. We have to find a way, it seems to me, to fund 50% of eligible new students. We're taking a look at what other states are doing that find themselves in the same kind of budgetary and academic environment. We're taking a look at shifting our focus from being able to fund the cost of attendance to simply providing support to cover the cost of tuition and fees, which is a significant shift, but clearly we're going to have to find more ways to make these funds stretch even further than they currently do. Once again, we're continuing to work on developmental education. I'm very gratified you're going to have before you today. Well, they're on the consent calendar. We have two PhD programs in developmental education. We want to professionalize the field. As you know, historically, developmental education has been taught by adjunct faculty, part-time faculty. There's not a lot of research, a lot of solid research in developmental education regarding what works and what doesn't, and so we are now building a research and a professionalized infrastructure in Texas to make sure that students who require developmental education will get first quality instruction, and we'll have high quality research that will enable us to make judgments about what works and what doesn't. We will continue to strengthen two-year colleges, as I mentioned a moment ago. There's a lot of interesting, a lot of exciting things going on in community colleges, working with early college high schools, dual credit programs. There's a lot of activity around developmental education. Pushing it down into high schools is a very promising development. We have to continue to recognize the increasingly important role of community colleges and strengthen them. I should also say that despite the fact that there was a lot of bad news for community colleges and overall funding, the fact that the legislature didn't cut formula funding, I think, is a significant indication that the legislature increasingly appreciates the importance of two-year institutions. If you look at the next bullet point, we want to continue to emphasize a balance between access and success, that students who simply enter college but don't graduate don't help themselves, they don't help the economy, and they certainly don't help the state. We're going to continue to refine our outcomes-based funding proposals. Chairman Heldenfels and I made a presentation to the A&M board last Friday, and after our comments, including some about outcomes-based funding, there was an expression of support from members of the board and members of the A&M administration to work with us to make sure we get this done next session. We're going to encourage universities, not all institutions of higher education, but universities to review their admission standards and to make sure that that their admission standards are commensurate with their ability to help the students graduate. We've had a couple of universities who've been looking at their admission standards and have identified students with a certain academic profile who simply are not succeeding at those particular institutions. It doesn't make a lot of sense to admit those students if they have virtually no chance of graduating. We are going to encourage institutions to set their admission standards at accurate thresholds and to work very closely with community colleges to make sure that students still have access to higher education. Students who don't have a certain level of academic preparation can go to community colleges where developmental ed is more readily available and where it's stronger than it typically is in universities, and they can move on to universities through comprehensive and strong alignments and articulation agreements. And finally, one of the things we clearly have to do is we have to strengthen the alignment between all institutions of higher education and workforce development. We need to improve orientation programs. We need to improve academic advising so that students know where the jobs are, they know what jobs pay, they know what their job prospects in particular fields are. What we do typically now, more so in universities and community colleges, when a student goes to see a college advisor, the college advisor asks, what do you want to major in? And the student says, philosophy. But what we don't say is, then we say, well, these are the courses you need to take in order to get a baccalaureate, a BA degree in philosophy. What we don't say, and what we should say is, what are you going to do with a degree in philosophy? What are your job plans? Are you aware that there aren't many opportunities in this field or that field? Are you aware that these are the wages in this field compared to another field? We need to be much more intentional and much more deliberate about the information that we give students, particularly incoming students, about the workforce as they enter college and what the workforce is likely to be like in Texas and around the country 10 years down the road. The Texas Workforce Commission has a lot of very good materials that provide students that information, and we simply haven't been using them sufficiently in higher education. But that will be one of our priorities. We need to be much more intentional about helping the state create jobs, and so that will be one of our priorities. There are a couple of other things like the Pathways Project, which is relevant to some of the issues we've just talked about.
Yes, I think most of you know about our Pathway effort. We had an example from the Houston area at I think our April meeting. And for those of you that don't know, our Pathway effort is an effort where we work with local institutions and school districts to actually take data they provide, add to our data, and we produce reports for the local school districts and community colleges and universities for their teachers and professors to sit down and review the success of their students as they go through the system. It's a way to, for local institutions be empowered to determine whether they were really preparing their students in the way that they should be, and to talk with each other and work together to improve that pathway as they move forward. This has been a voluntary process. We have this in place in Bexar County. We have it in Houston. That's the group you heard from previously, El Paso, and we're being prepared to go forward in South Texas. And we have other areas of the state who are coming forward and asking us to participate. In fact, in the case of South Texas, the higher ed institutions identified 21 independent school districts that wanted to participate in this effort. So this is a project that's voluntary, that we're finding ways to help make it happen. In each case, we're helping fund it in different kinds of ways, a different kind of funding stream, but it does things that you cannot do at the state level. You know, and it has the faculty from various levels of education working together. And I think that's something that all of you would be pleased to see, is how engaged and how important it is for our faculty that students succeed. I mean, you would be pleased about that. You sometimes see them being concerned about efforts at the state level, but when you get them down, and this has been the case in our transfer process as well, when you get the faculty from universities and community colleges talking, they begin to engage in how do they prepare people well in their field. Now, there's one other area in terms of success that you don't always think about, is the students who get into colleges and don't succeed. You may not know that according to the Census Bureau, there are 3 million adults over the age of 25 that have participated in college that haven't graduated. Just in the last 5 years in Texas, through our database, we've identified 68,000 students who have taken significant college work and stopped out and haven't finished. We've got over 40,000 of those students have taken at least 90 semester credit hours and they haven't finished, and 35,000 of those have 100 or more semester credit hours and have not finished. The state has made an immense investment in those students, as have the students in terms of their time and dollars, and many of them have loans in place. So just wanted to share with you briefly that we have about to go online. We've been working on this for months. Van Davis on our staff has been working on this. And working with Gentex, we've come up with a program called GradTex, which you'll see in a minute. And then this website will be going live soon. And I'd just like to share a couple things with you. If you click on Get Started, it's on the upper right-hand column, Get Started. You'll see that as a part of this, we have a credit transfer tool in which students can actually go in and load in the courses they have, and they'll see how they fit into our participating institutions. Raymond mentioned the career focus. We have a part for career focus. But I think it's interesting. Go to returning student counselor, Marilyn. Right. Third bullet. Okay, that'll work. And just slowly scroll down. What you have here is the institutions that are participating: Lamar, Midwestern, A&M Commerce, Texas Tech, UT Brownsville, Houston Clear Lake, and Houston Downtown, and University of North Texas System. When you see a person identified, this is actually, each of these institutions has identified one of their staff members to work directly with students who want to return to school and to talk with them. So this is a site where not only can they see what courses can transfer and how it will fit into programs at these institutions, but the schools have identified and dedicated a staff member to work with these students as they come forward to help finish their degrees. So our goal is to get as many of these 68,000 students back into school, completed their degree, and move forward. So there are a number of efforts that we have to have. We have to be relentless in finding students and helping them succeed. Now, the interesting thing about this is, while we haven't officially started it, the U.S. Department of Ed already in April has identified in their toolkit for college completion this program in Texas as an emerging best practice for the country, and that other states should look at it. So we really appreciate the institutions that we've been working with to get this underway, and also Van Davis's effort in terms of working with us. We're determined to help make sure that once students get into school that they actually finish and do it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, talk about a cost efficiency measure. Think of the students that have accumulated 90 hours of course credit. They've made a very substantial investment in their education. The state has made a substantial investment in their education, and they're just 1 year short of finishing. And recovering some of these students and helping them get back into school and finish will help us a lot towards achieving our goals of closing the gaps, but it will also be a very central cost efficiency measure that we will promote. I think we've got a really robust and innovative strategy to not only help us achieve the goals of closing the gaps over the last 4 years of the initiative, but also establish a foundation to launch Texas into a position of national and international leadership in higher education. I don't know of another state that, for example, has developed a strategy for developmental education, which includes creating doctoral programs that will help train professionals in the field, and will also create a rich body of research literature on which to draw to make decisions about how to improve our pedagogical approaches. So I'm very excited about these preliminary ideas. We will flesh them out quickly and bring them to the board for further comment and for approval when that's appropriate.
Chairman, could I ask a question? And this is just for thought. As I hear this and look at it, I want to truly innovative and certainly something that all Texans should take a lot of pride in seeing us step out and address some of these students that have kind of fallen through the cracks and take a step backwards and see what we can do to get them back on track. But the question I have is that have we looked, or could we look, and this may be a question that Van needs to address, at encouraging these institutions to develop some form of an online program specifically targeted towards these students that would perhaps specialize in helping them to complete this last 30 hours of their education. In my mind, that may be one of the approaches or strategies that we really ought to take a hard look at.
Actually, Dr. Golden, most of the 8 institutions that are initially participating in the Grad Texas campaign, 7 of them have online degree programs that are specifically geared to be degree completion programs. And that was one of the criteria that we consciously looked at when we made the decision on who these initial participating institutions would be, so that students would have both face-to-face opportunities for those that wanted to take that route, but for those that wanted to complete online, they would also have those opportunities.
And yes. If I might add, related to the low-cost degrees, Van, working with institutions, has identified 8 institutions potentially that want to use online programs to produce a low-cost degree that are going to begin meeting with each other together. So I think there are a number of exciting things happening, and I think it's really important to emphasize the innovation that many institutions are wanting to participate in these programs that are coming forward and wanting to participate and having ideas in how to make not only the adult completion finish, but how that they might produce a low-cost degree. We did mention earlier that UNT Dallas has already announced a $10,000 degree weekend MBA program that will begin soon.
Thank you.
That's good. Members, any other questions? Joe?
Yes, I have a question, a comment or two. Raymond, I was very impressed with your presentation about the community colleges in particular. I'm fortunate enough to live right between 2 of the best ones in the state from my perspective, and that's McLennan County Community College and Temple. And I know enough about them to be dangerous, I suppose, but the bottom line is, it seems to me, and Dr. McCowan is here, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, she's the president of the community college in McLennan County, is that the funding is a constant issue that's nagging away at us. And when you mention the numbers of people that are coming and gravitating toward the community colleges, that just increases the need for more funding. In our situation in Waco, just before I left, I read that Baylor is raising their tuition by 6.5%. And the kids can't afford to go there now. So you throw another 6.5% on that. I don't know how that's going to work out, but it's going to be difficult. But the other thing that is bothersome to me is you have a kid that comes through the community colleges and does well. And that could be, let's just take McLennan County Community College. That kid can't afford to go to Baylor at all. Not in a good day. Now, so where did they go? They can't drive. Most of them don't have cars, or if they do, they can't drive to Austin to go to University of Texas or go to College Station or go to North Texas or Stephenville at Tarleton, all good schools, but they just don't have the wherewithal. And for the life of me, I've been talking about this now for 6 years. What do we do? How are we going to get this thing fixed? Because I just see that we're going to drop behind in that particular area. Not because of any reason that anybody's done anything, it's just the location is a little bit of a problem because they have no place to go. So what happens? They just go away. Now, a question that I've got, and the presidents of the community colleges probably have a coronary with this, but is any consideration being given to the community colleges to make them four-year colleges? Don't have to answer the question. That's my question. And if so, how are we going to go about it? And even then, you have to worry about the funding again. So we're really between a rock and a hard place, no question about it. So that's my last shot on my last day at work. So I want to get a lick in. I want to get a lick in for my team.
Mr. Hinton, let me mention that one way to address the problem is through the effort to develop low-cost degrees with institutions across the state to work with community colleges so that they students can have the opportunity through online programs to complete degrees that may not be available locally statewide. And we'll be working with community colleges on that. I learned recently that the Community College Association is working with Western Governors University to pursue a statewide MOU for their students to continue a degree through that effort. So there are a number of efforts underway to address that, and then there are, of course, programs that you approved on the consent calendar, which will be more limited to help some of those things happen on a local basis. But we have to work together. Our Lumina funded project on tuning, which is making sure the degrees are in line with industry, but also to develop compacts with community colleges across the state. As you know, we're working in mechanical engineering. Through that effort, in a period of a few months, we developed the equivalent of 200 articulation agreements in one fell swoop, and it will be the same at all those participation institutions. We're continuing to do that. We're working with chemical engineering and chemistry now. We'll continue this for 3 more years. We're developing learning objectives for courses to make sure that students will be able to transfer. So there are a lot of things going on, and we do have a lot of creative efforts going on at all our institutions to help work together. The Virtual College of Texas through community colleges is a good base to begin some of what we're talking about. So I think you'll see some good things continue and to work with McLennan and Temple.
I would sure hope so. And I also know that we've got some technical colleges in the area that also have their problems too, and they struggle. And it's a tough question. I don't have any answers to it, but I keep pecking away at it. Sooner or later, we're going to figure out how to do it. I'm sure of that, because we've got not enough education in this room right here to calculate all that stuff and bring it into fruition. That's it. I'm through. No more.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Joe, this ain't my last day on the job, but I do want to assure you that when you leave, there will be some of the rest of us that will continue pecking along behind you, I being one of them, and I'm fixing to do a little bit right now. I want to say a couple things behind Joe and what he has said to follow up some of the statements he's made. You know, we hear a lot, and we continue to hear a lot about efficiency, effectiveness, and transparency, and we look for models out there that we can emulate within our institutions across the state. And I think we have a system that perhaps we've overlooked at times, and that's our community colleges in terms of transparency and effectiveness and efficiency. I don't think there's anybody here that would disagree with me, or I can't imagine there'd be one. Dollar for dollar, our best money is being spent in the community colleges of Texas, and we're increasing those demands, and we've admitted that. Y'all have shown us that clearly this morning, that those demands on our institutions that we call community colleges are increasing because of the exponential growth that's occurring and the demands that are being placed on them. You know, I'll make a point. I've seen recently in some of the publications that all of us have seen that with regard to teaching loads and faculty teaching assignments in our four-year institutions, and I'm not really, well, I guess maybe I am. Maybe I am being somewhat critical, because those numbers in our four-year institutions are going down. And I'm not trying to downplay the importance of research or publications. That's not what I'm trying to do today. Nor do I think the governor of this great state's been trying to do that either. I think he's been accused of that, and I don't think it's an accurate accusation. But the point I make is that quite clearly faculty teaching loads in our four institutions have declined. That's factual. But in our community colleges, they're the same as they were in the 1960s. In fact, in many instances, they've increased. And I suspect they probably will continue to increase as these numbers of students flock to our community colleges. So, Joe, without sounding like you're stepping off the stump and I'm stepping on it, I guess maybe in the way I am. I just did, yeah. Because, you know, this board, I think, clearly recognizes and will continue to advocate the important role that community colleges plays. And we cannot, and we know that, we very clearly understand that, cannot close the gaps with without a very strong community college system that's adequately funded, that has the adequate resources necessary and vitally needed to close the gaps. And, you know, I don't know what we can do. It all boils down to resources. I'm not real sure turning them into four-year institutions is the answer. Perhaps I think community colleges have a distinct role to play, and whether or not that's awarding baccalaureate degrees in large numbers is one of them. I'm not sure that's the answer, but certainly their mission within the overall goals that we've set needs to be enhanced and supported, and we need to continually to work collectively. Even the four-year institutions have an interest in seeing a strong system in place. And our commissioner, I think, has recognized the fact that there needs to be a smooth transition. I think that the four-year institutions need to be in a position to help guide those two-year colleges to clearly understand how those students can make that transition and be successful when they leave. The other thing I want to say is that I believe it's important that we begin to change the culture of our two-year institutions and making them and realize how important it is that those students leave those institutions with an associate degree. And don't tell me that students swirl in and out of those institutions, because I already know that. I already know they swirl in and out, and I know that's an important role that the two-year institutions play. But having said that, I still think, this is my personal opinion, that we need to emphasize the importance and the value of an associate degree, and they need to be counseled, and the culture needs to change in the two-year institutions, that when they enter there, that they need to be told and mentored and expected to walk away in 2 years with a degree in hand or a certificate. Joe, how did I do?
Pretty good.
Thanks. Whip. I'm not going to jump on that bandwagon. I think y'all both did a great job of it. Talk about our commitment to community colleges. I would just say a couple of things. One, Commissioner, I hope that you mentioned that you're going to come back to the board on financial aid recommendations. One, I'd just like to know, what's the timing going to be on that? Number two is, I hope, tying into a lot of these comments, that one of the things that we do look at are things as to how we might be able to modify Texas grant, because this number was staggering to me, this 40,000 number with 90 semester credit hours. And you know, we know that a big part of the reason is because a lot of those people are employed, they don't have the money to go back to school, and it just makes me say, you know, they can't get a Texas grant. So as we begin to look at where the low-hanging fruit is to get an educated workforce, you know, should we be thinking about that? Should we modify that Texas grant program where we can make that money available to them? I also think about the community college students that don't get an associate degree, and I don't think they're eligible for a Texas grant. So the one thing y'all know this, I'm preaching to the choir, but you know, it's just important that financial aid doesn't become a disincentive for these kids continuing their education if they've spent a couple of years getting 20 hours in a community college, you know. So I really hope that when we come back and see those recommendations that we're really thinking along those lines also. The second area I'd really like y'all to comment on is, you know, I see the point about implementing outcomes-based funding, and I guess on my last day, you know, that is one of the things that was my dream that we'd see accomplished in this session. For all the reasons that we've got to start focusing on the success side, and again, each of y'all knows that. But HB 9, what does that mean for us? I mean, can you walk the board through what HB 9 means and what we should expect in terms of the work going forward, in terms of looking at HB 9 and what we need to do as a board to get ahead of that, again, curve in terms of outcomes-based funding and working with institutions?
Well, I hope Susan and David and Van feel free to jump in as well. What HB 9 did, it seems to me, is to create a pathway to actually implement outcomes-based funding with appropriations. It indicated that it's an important policy issue. I think the strong support it had, particularly in the House, indicated that it's a policy direction that the legislature wants Texas to move in. I think there were some questions about some of the metrics and some of the impact that our recommended outcomes-based funding metrics would have on certain institutions. We have to deal with that issue. I think we have to explain. We have the interim to do that. I think even though we talked to an awful lot of people, we talked to institutional leaders, we talked to regents, we talked to members of the legislature, I think there was still some confusion about the predicted graduation rate, and I think we have to clarify that. I think we've got a good deal of momentum. I think it's significant that the National Governors Association just published a document endorsing outcomes-based funding. So it's not something, Texas is not simply one of a handful of states that's looking at this. This was endorsed by the governors of this country. I think there's a growing recognition among institutional leaders that that this is something that we ought to do. I think one of the compelling arguments that ultimately carried the day was everybody agrees that outcomes-based funding is a good idea, but given the very dramatic budget cuts, this was not a good time to implement change. Our position was it was the best time to implement change, but that argument didn't carry the day in the legislature. I think we're in a very strong position, and we're going to work very hard between now and the beginning of the next session to work with members of the legislature, work with institutions to make sure that everyone fully understands what we're proposing, the impact it will have on institutions, institution by institution, why it's a good thing for the state of Texas. We also have more data from the states that have implemented it. For example, the recent report came out on Tennessee, which has the longest history of implementing outcomes-based funding. It said that the amounts of money that they committed to outcomes-based funding between 2% and 5% were too small to affect institutional behavior, which I think strengthens our position that we should commit 10% of formula funding to outcomes-based funding. There were some other questions about metrics and so forth, but I think that will be, as far as I can tell, once again, we have to get approval from the board, but I expect it will be our highest priority for the next legislative session.
Any other comments? I believe we do have one item as far as the major policy discussion that we need a motion. Consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation. Let me to the board relating to the approval of the annual closing of the gaps by 2015 progress report. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second. And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Next item on our agenda is item number 5, recognition of excellence. This item is meant to showcase models of excellence within the education community and highlight the outstanding work of our education faculty and administrators and institutional programs around our state. The LEAN initiative at the University of Texas at Dallas is an example of what institutions can do to increase productivity and engage in continuous improvement. This presentation was first made to the Higher Education Cost Efficiencies Committee and is pertinent to the major policy discussion. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, good morning. My name is Calvin Jameson. I'm the Senior Vice President for Business Affairs at the University of Texas at Dallas. And on behalf of Dr. David Daniel, our president, who was unable to be here this morning, I want to talk a little bit about our LEAN initiative at University of Texas at Dallas, which along with him and the provost, Dr. Hobson Wellenthal, have embraced what we're trying to do here. What you have before you is sort of a concept, and my background, for information-wise, is I'm a former city manager who also has been in higher education.
Dr. Jameson, would you pull your mic a little closer?
Sure. Okay.
There you
okay.
go.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm a former city manager who's also been at Virginia Tech on the faculty there, at Virginia Commonwealth University, Hampton University, in the private sector, and then now at University of Texas at Dallas. What I want to talk about a little bit about is to speak about what UT Dallas has done, but a little background here for all of us. I enrollment, I came to UT Dallas in August of 2007. We had a little over 14,000 students. As you can see now, we're over 17,000. This fall we'll be over 18,000. So we're growing fast, and in terms of when you do that, sometimes your infrastructure is not there to support that, so you have to look at doing things a little differently. When you look at us overall, we started obviously in 1969 with the approval from the coordinating board, and accepted our first freshman class in 1990. Rapid growth has been a part of who we are today. I'll real quickly go through this. The president and the board has supported some key goals. One, a national tier 1 you've heard a lot about. Expand our student enrollment and our faculty numbers. Improve the retention and graduation rates, increase research efforts, and number of graduates with doctoral degrees, which we continue to make progress. Tell our story better about what UT Dallas is all about. Improve our annual giving and endowment. And then the one that we're working on is improving operational efficiency. And there's 2 ways we're doing that. One is we're participating in shared services, an effort that is spearheaded by Dr. Scott Kelly with the UT system and the implementation of our PeopleSoft efforts there. The second way is to look at our lean operations as a part of our efforts to manage our cost on campus. Let me talk a little bit about what lean means at the University of Texas at Dallas. Obviously, lean is not about, all of us going out and losing 20 pounds. It's not also about cutting people along the way. What it is about is creating capacity, and let me talk about that one overall. It identifies improvement areas, or areas where if you flow chart something, you can look at the process and look at where the things that don't add value. You ask yourself, why do I need to do this? My example is that we used to produce 121 reports in my area alone for the coordinating board, the system, and the state. And we'd always ask the question, why do we do this many reports? Because a lot of staff. So long story short, as you well know, the legislature passed a bill this year to reduce those numbers along the way. So we're looking at issues along there. Remove waste in terms of time, motion, and money. It takes your time and then the money that we can save there. Again, remove non-value added activity, fill the gaps in purpose, process, and performance. And what Lean really is about a culture. It's making a habit, not an act, of finding ways to streamline processes. It's continuous improvement, continuous feedback, continuous evaluation of how you do business. Now, some Lean results, and before I go into the results part, how we got started. We pulled together the vice presidents and assistant vice presidents and directors of on campus, and we sent them through a Lean process that looked at value streaming and looking for things that we can do better on campus and create the culture, the attitude. And the reason why we put them together with something I call service excellence is because the combination of those two creates the environment to begin to make this happen. Some results. We automated our budget process and reduced paper use 10,000 sheets annually. Now you have to put things in perspective. I'm from Virginia, where I say we have real trees. When I came to Dallas, on my interview, I went to UT Dallas, and I couldn't find the center of the campus. Very flat, and they used to call it the little campus on the prairie with tumbleweeds and the likes. So I can understand why they didn't have any trees, because they cut them all up, all the paper we had on campus, part of the process. We then did e-procurement, purchasing tool to reduce the time for smaller supplies. Before, when you did a requisition, you sign up for the requisition, it went to a couple of signatures, and eventually made it back to procurement. Well, we automated that. A click gets you to the vendor. The vendor fills the order and delivers it the next day. And eventually we'll get an invoice to pay for it in time. Also working on that electronically. But we had to work on those kind of small things, attitude-wise, to make things work. The next one here is lead time and requisition process. I mentioned that one as well. But if you notice on the left, the amount of paper, now we produce this monthly. Okay, like I said before, the reason why we didn't have enough trees, because they had them all used up in paper. But you notice that we automate a lot of the process overall. Our bank reconciliation process, as an example, we save over 1,000 hours. Now, when you think about small things like that, the issue here is that they add up over time, and you begin to save some dollars in terms of what you do. This is an example of our flowcharting process in Lean. And what we were able to identify this time around was over $900,000 in cost avoidance as a result of looking at things differently in terms of how we did business. Improving our utility rates, leveraging our relationship with suppliers, and documenting over 330 business processes, 80 in HR and 250 in finance, about how we do business. Okay, now we started as is to be process, and if you look at that, you start thinking about things in which you can find areas where it doesn't add value, so you take it out, and you can add a value to that process overall. Now, 85% of our employees, for example, own direct deposit. Now, why is this important too? Well, if you're cutting all those checks versus direct deposits in terms of what they're doing. We're working on improving that number, and our facilities group was one of the last holdouts. And then we had the Ice Bowl. We were down for 4 days doing Super Bowl, and they couldn't get checks, and so as we passed out checks, we passed out direct deposit applications, and it worked. Recouped about $125,000 from potential insurance losses as examples overall. Another is just a simple one here, $44,000 in chemical waste management process changes, 35% reduction in time required to conduct lab inspections, 80% reduction in time required to conduct fire safety inspections. That's save time, motion, and money in terms of things we're able to do overall by barcoding and the results of what comes from that. As you can see, during the time that I've been there, we've been able to plant 5,000 trees. And this is an example of the campus itself. We have also the only platinum LEED building in the UT system with our student services building, of which, through our contracting, we saved an additional $16,000 and just as a result of the platinum LEED, and we anticipate saving more money over time. The average employee manages for a grounds group, about 11 acres. Ours manages about 20.76 acres based on the efficiency of how they do business and what we've been able to do overall. So simple kinds of things that we do to send a message. Now, why is this important to include the service excellence component of it? Let me just say this. One of the things we find is that the people who make a difference in the organization are the frontliners, the administrative assistants. They're the ones who know what the process is, what the weaknesses are in the process. So I pulled together about 40 of those individuals and said to them, here's your goal. Come back and bring to me some guiding principles of how we want to deliver service excellence at the university. Because here's our vision. We want people to feel better about the campus when they leave than they did when they came on. And it has to do with the experience that they encounter when they interface with anybody on campus. Well, let me just say what they did. First of all, they paused. They didn't believe we really were going to do anything with it. But we said, you bring it back, I'll take it to cabinet, we'll endorse it, and we'll make a program out of it. We'll make it a part of how we do business. Long story short, in the middle you see they came back with 5 key customer service initiatives. And you can see those as we in front of you on the screen. Bottom line is they will focus on the integrity of the process, innovation, stewardship, commitment, and results. All about service excellence. And they're all interrelated with regards to the Lean Initiative. The result has been over 650 employees have been certified in our Cash Comment Pride Service Excellence Program. In addition to that, as many of you know, we're implementing PeopleSoft, which is an ERP system. And as a result of that process, we know we have to develop our talent. So we've also started a PeopleSoft Academy on campus to make sure the tools are there. And in some respects, from our side of it, it's sort of a selfish role, partly, because I don't want people taking all my PeopleSoft employees from me. So therefore, I support the pipeline to make sure we got the people in place to do that. And of the ones in our recent academy, we're hired too. And we're working on making sure the process works. Well, why is this important? It's important because if you're going to implement Lean in your respective organization, the thing that you have to do is this. You got to create the culture where people day in and day out are thinking about how we can improve how we do business, and that's really an attitude. The second thing you have to do is you have to think about service excellence at the front line, because those are the people who day in and day out make things happen. And let me tell you one story, and then I'll take any questions you may have. I'm a former city manager in Richmond, Virginia, from Richmond, Virginia. In that capacity, one of the things that I would do every year, there was tax season. And then there'll be a line around City Hall. And they'd wait 6 hours at a time. I mean, just wait in line. So when I first came in, I tried to figure out, now, how can I address this issue? Well, the first thing is I didn't figure it out. So I decided, well, if you're going to wait in line, make it fun. So I brought in a jazz combo, brought in some food, and just created a party while they pay taxes. Okay. The next year, I set up satellites, okay, and I dispersed it around campus, around the city, excuse me. So, but there was a group of about 50 to 75 people who would come back every year to the same location. And I'd go and I asked him, well, why do you keep coming back? You have this. He said, well, look, this is the only time of year I see my friends. And they always come back to the tax season. Well, the bottom line was simply this. We had to create a service mindset in terms of how we were delivering service to the citizen who, by design, are paying for something they really don't want to do in many cases. In some cases, we saw this as an opportunity for us to set the tone. At the University of Texas at Dallas, we believe that if you establish the right culture with regards to lean, streamlining things, and you do it with a service mindset, you're going to deliver over time changes that are important to the organization. So, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, that is my overview of what we've done, my Reader's Digest version of what we've done at the University of Texas at Dallas. I'll take any questions.
Members, any questions, comments? Yes, Raymond?
I know this is outside your expertise, but I know it's not outside your area of interest. The question is, you've done some extraordinary things in the business side of the house. How can we incorporate lean practices into the instructional mission of the institution? How can we imbue faculty with this notion of delivering instruction in a leaner, more cost-efficient way? Because that's where we really have to make improvements in cost efficiency. I think most of our institutions are either have already undertaken some of the things that you've done, or they are working on achieving these lean goals. But where we haven't made nearly as many gains is in the way we deliver instruction and learning and teaching and learning. How can we use some of these same practices in instruction, academics?
It's a loaded question, but a very positive one from my side of it. The way I would look at it is that I think first, as far as instruction is concerned, you have to get faculty to first understand how they get things done to accomplish what they need to accomplish first, from the time they step on campus to be paid to set up the instruction, to ultimately when they themselves decide to teach a class. Now, I also happen to have an appointment where I do teach class as well. So one of the things that I have is that many people are looking at the online instruction as one way to lean up how we do things. But in terms of the instruction process, we also have to look at, when I say lean, saving costs, looking at e-textbooks in terms of what we're doing overall, making decisions about how we do the distribution of tests to students, and make sure that our learning process steps in the way it needs to from perspective of outcomes that students may have in our classes. The advantage I think that I've tried to bring to my class is that being a former practitioner, I can bring real life situations to the process. And I try to make sure that you manage between what is theory and what is an actual practical, here's how you get it done. If I look at the instructional side of things, and I look at how courses are actually put together, some cases you may have a situation where there are a multitude books required for just a couple of courses that you may have as one. There's also a case of the curriculum. Each professor is allowed to teach as they see it each of their respective curriculums from their respective component. Sometimes you can normalize that process on some courses, okay, and that oftentimes can help you. As you get to the higher level courses, I'm not quite sure you would want to normalize that. You want to make sure that those are unique for those respective areas. But when you're teaching a freshman level class, there's a lot of ways you can teach it, but the content of what you want them to have in an English class or in a math class, etc., you can normalize that more.
Any other questions?
You may have covered this, and I apologize for having to step out for a few seconds. And if you did cover it, then I'll catch you some other time and ask you it. Outsourcing. Did you discuss, or did you mention outsourcing some of the things that universities and colleges have to do as a measure of perhaps becoming more leaner?
Well, the point I'd like to make to persons is that lean is not necessarily about cutting your people. It's about creating capacity. So at UT Dallas, we know we're growing dramatically. And so in the fall, if we're over 18,000 students, we don't have the infrastructure to support that up front. But what we do is that if we look at the tasks that individual support staff do, and we said to them, okay, we're going to add additional number of faculty members, we look at the things that they do that don't add value, replace those to provide support for the things that may. Now, are there areas we can outsource? Absolutely. But sometimes you can outsource it and you lose some of the quality of what you need to have. My example, instead of outsourcing printing on campus, we decided to make an investment in printing. Why? Because of the service delivery that it can provide for us. Sometimes they can give you a low bid on the outsourcing, and then a couple of years later you lose on quality and service, and eventually the price goes back up and you got to bring it back in. Now, we do outsource and manage the management of our residence hall. We outsource the management of our food services. Okay, so those are two areas that we can make sure we stay on top of it and deal with the quality control. But we are strategic in terms of what we outsource.
Anything else, members? Very interesting. Thank you very much, and we appreciate it. Obviously, the efforts that you've made could be used in any number of areas. And in fact, I think we're looking at a kind of a lean process here, and we've seen some very effective changes. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys, too.
Okay, we're going to move to item number 6, matters relating to the Committee on Closing the Gaps. I want to give you just a little bit of an overview of some of the items that are happening related to the Committee on Closing the Gaps. I can move this. Okay. The Coordinating Board hosted a state P16 council meeting on Wednesday, July 20th in Austin. This was the third state P16 council meeting of this year, chaired by the Commissioner of Higher Education, Raymond Paredes. New council members, Dr. Daniel King, Superintendent of FAR San Juan Alamo Independent School District, Dr. William Flores, President of the University of Houston Downtown, and John Fitzpatrick, Executive Director of Texas High School Project, were introduced. Members discussed how the state P16 Council can more directly support the Gentex campaign, how the state P16 Council can address the successes and challenges of Advise Texas, and making Texas higher education affordable and accessible for non-traditional students. The next state P16 Council meeting is scheduled for October 12, 2011 at 2 p.m. here at the Coordinating Board room here in Austin. Also, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, in partnership with Texas Women's University, hosted a College Success Summit held on July 25th and 26th in Dallas. The summit provided an opportunity for institutions to continue the work performed in preparing the Comprehensive Student Success Program proposal originally submitted to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board in December of 2010. 37 institutions were invited to send a team of up to 5 members representing faculty, academic affairs staff, student affairs staff, and leadership administration. Over 200 summit participants worked together with their institutional team, as well as with colleagues from other institutions, through one of various thematic strands regarding student success strategies and operations. All strands covered building and enhancing student learning outcomes and assessment, delivery to diverse audiences, and out-of-classroom influences, such as advising and peer interaction. P16 staff and national experts in student success engaged teams in data-driven working sessions designed to share, develop, and evaluate the comprehensive student success strategies included in their original proposal. By the end of the 2 days, participating teams had collaboratively developed action plans for cost-effective interventions on their campuses to address post-secondary student success. Institutions will continue their work through a convening schedule for 2012. Good work. Okay, agenda item 6B is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the board relating to the approval to provide additional funding for the evaluation of the Comprehensive Student Success Program. Dr. Laredo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In October of 2010, the board authorized us to expend $250,000 for evaluation of the Comprehensive Student Success Program, which is the program you've just spoken about, and the summit that was held Monday and Tuesday of this week. As a result of that process, a contract was awarded to Texas State University in San Marcos. They were selected as the evaluators of our efforts. What we would like to do at this time is to ask you to allow us to add an additional $70,000 to that contract, because our work, of course, now has expanded, but we would like to add 5 additional site visits as part of their work to the 5 institutions that were awarded the grants, with additional site visits for each of the 5 funded institutions, plus the technical support. We really had a resounding response to this RFP when we even put it out. Unfortunately, we did not have enough funds to have awarded, of the 37 contracts, more than half of those who were absolutely phenomenal. That is how the summit came about. We did not want to lose the work that these institutions had already put on the front end with the RFP, and Dr. Kristen Kramer, along with Eddie Hyatt and the staff at the time, came up with the idea of implementing the summit. And as you can tell, if 200 people came to a summit who had not even been funded out of an RFP, that shows that there definitely is an interest. So we want to expand our evaluation to learn from what we're doing, so that then we can then look at scalability, and that is what this request is for.
Questions? None. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 6C, consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the board relating to the reallocation of success initiative in DE Mathematics Side M project funds. Dr. Laredo.
As data shows, developmental mathematics is one of the greatest hurdles for students to overcome, and who already, by the mere virtue of being in developmental math, are demonstrating that they are not college ready in that area. The original approval for our Side M project was for $500,000 over 2 years, and this award was given to the Epic Center at San Marcos State University. $250,000 was designated for the center to implement and support the work of moving forth with this project. And $250,000 was to be used by Epic to award subcontracts to the 5 community colleges that are participating in our demonstration demo sites for developmental educations. During the first year of the project, the grantees have participated in high-quality training related to aligning the curriculum with the college and career readiness standards. But we are seeking approval to decrease that $500,000 grant to by $125,000 to reallocate those funds, so that Texas State University, the mathematics, PhD mathematics program, can actually deliver the training. What we found that when we were delivering the training originally, these faculty members would have to leave their institution to go and participate in training, so it minimized the number of people we could tap into on each campus. What we're trying to do is customize by institution the continued training in this math program so that when the faculty from the math department go out, they're going to an institution, not only tapping into full-time faculty, they're tapping into part-time faculty and adjunct faculty. So we're trying to modify that delivery. It becomes very complicated in modifying the contract since it's issued to Texas State when you're trying to separate it out. So it's easier if we come back to you to ask that the original contract of $500,000 be modified minus 125 so we can separate the two out. This is in agreement with the university. It was the best way for them to deal in terms of the funding and not make it complicated. So we're not changing our work. What we're doing is focusing that work more intensely, but we're still moving forward.
Any discussion? If not, is there a motion to approve item 6C? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. D is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the board relating to approval to enter into contracts for the purpose of identifying promising practices in the area of developmental education in partial fulfillment of HB 1244 and SB 162, 82nd Texas Legislature regular session. Dr. Laredo.
Mr. Chairman, SB 162 of the 82nd Texas Legislative Session requires that the coordinating board develop a statewide plan for developmental education. In developing the plan, the coordinating board there's three things that we are required to do, and that's to research relevant issues related to developmental education, study and develop best practices for successful developmental education programs, and assess various methods of providing developmental education to students to determine which methods, if any, should be implemented on a statewide basis. In addition to SB 162, HB 1244 of the 82nd Legislature requires institutions to base developmental coursework on research best practices. In May of 2010, the coordinating board funded 9 developmental education demonstration projects, 5 at the community college level, 4 at the university level. During the first year, grantees have made major structural changes, curricular changes to the program. So the staff is seeking now to select 3 institutions to work with the DEP sites to, number 1, identify promising practice based on in-depth analysis of the institutional data that they are tracking as they admit students and work with them through the redesigned programs. We would like to also have a list of essentials that are needed to implement these practices across institutions, including the need for the addition of technology, which is one of the requirements. And then at the same time, develop a true cost of what is needed to implement a revised program in developmental education that meets the needs of students to move them through the pipeline into credit-bearing certificate courses and into completion. The selected institutions must have strong knowledge of current research in developmental education and a proven ability to conduct strong research projects. So in the next year, we will be working very closely with the institutions that have been funded. As you know, we have a report that we must yield and give to the legislature after our 2 years of work, and we are going to be prepared to do so, and this is why we come to you with this request today.
Questions?
Judy, I'm just a little confused. I'm confused with the body of work that this money is going to fund versus I understand the DEP sites that we funded last year, the 5 institutions, but I'm confused with what this money's funding. Are these going to be 3 new institutions?
This will be 3 institutions.
And what's the role they play in terms of the interrelationship with the 5 where we've been running the DEPs?
They will be doing the research on what they have been doing that causes change or does not cause change, so that as we move forward, when we come with our recommendations for what we have learned, we have to provide a study that's the research study connected to the work we've done. And so these would be 3 institutions who have the capacity and the staff to do actual research work on what is taking place in our institutions.
Okay, I got it. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Not, is there a motion for item 6D? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 6E, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to expend funds awarded to the Coordinating Board under the 2011 and 2012 College Access Challenge Grant. Chris Alvarado, Director of Special Projects for P16 Initiatives, will present this item. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members. As you are aware, the College Access Challenge Grant has been awarded to Texas for 3 consecutive years, and each year the governor has appointed or designated the Coordinating Board as the receiving and managing agency for these funds. This application came out in late May, actually like the last week of May, and we had about a 1-month turnaround to get this back to the feds for review. This is a non-competitive grant award.
Chris, excuse me just a minute. Joe, before you sneak out, we need you to stay here for just until Jim gets back.
Okay.
We need a quorum.
I'm leaving.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Just had to make a stop with
I understand.
staff members to give them some paperwork.
I'll speed it up then. The CACG fund application came out in late May. We had a 1-month turnaround time to get it back to the Department of Education. We missed the timeline to present to the actual committee in June, so we're presenting it now to the full board. This is the budget as it was outlined last year, very similarly. The blue page outlines the major areas that we're focusing on programmatically. Last year we had 7. We're continuing 4 of those main projects, as you can see on the blue page. I'll briefly run through them and provide some background for the new members. The Generation Texas marketing campaign is a public awareness campaign and grassroots movement to promote college and career-ready culture across the state. The second item is the College Advising Corps, being referred to now as Advise Texas College Advising Corps, and that is a replication model off of the National College Advising Corps. And we are expanding that project from 15 pilot schools in this first year to 120 schools across the state. We're also bringing in partners. UT Austin's Institute of Public School Initiatives was our administrator of this project for the pilot year, and we've expanded and included partnerships with Texas A&M, Trinity University, and Texas Christian University. The third item is the Comprehensive Student Services program, and we're looking at 2 different programs that address that item. One is the AVID Post-Secondary Pilot Project and expanding that. And then the second piece is the Comprehensive Student Success Program that Dr. Laredo referenced earlier and was discussed. We're looking at continuing that project and having another RFP for awarding additional funds. And lastly is Dr. Davis's project, the Adult Completion Project, or Grad Texas, and expanding that beyond its initial year. I'd be happy to address any questions. Following the blue page is the detailed budget with a narrative. It entails brief descriptions of how the money is going to be spent, and also provides the non-federal expenditure or the cost share match that we're required as part of the award.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Chris, in looking, I know that we've had real success, or recent success, in College for All Texans and getting some private sector dollars really interested in specifically the College Advising Corps. If we continue to have that same success, can we shift around the allocation of the CAGC, or do these numbers have to stay firm? Because part of that money will be used as the match, I know. Okay.
We can apply for amendments. but we have to stay within the scope of the grant, of what it's allowing you to do. We're focusing a lot on the success side, and to say that really Texas is really leading this effort, and when you look at other CACG grants out there, so we're really excited. But if we do any change, if we have money left over that we can move out, we just have to go through an amendment and submit that to Washington for consideration. And Chris might want to add something to that.
And that could be easily addressed through an amendment, as Dr. Laredo mentioned. It wouldn't take much other than we have to submit it in writing and get approval from our program director at the Department of Ed.
And remind me, when we have to meet the grant provision, the matching provisions by?
We submitted the application and we detailed the match in that. Yes, sir. And we were changing the numbers at the very last minute because we were being notified of some last-minute awards from the private sector, as you referenced.
We also have a report that is due in, it's due in March, or is it May? We only do 2 reportings, but when we do that, we have a chance to then align that match. If more money has come in, we can go in there and fix it. So it isn't the match that we turned in with the grant that's firm. It can be changed if we have other resources that come in, and we remove the match that we currently have and put that other match in. So you're able to maneuver it. You just have to have the match when that report goes in to them.
Thank you, and thanks for the work on it. Really important, especially in light of what's happened to us in the College Readiness Initiative and the budget. These are awful important dollars for us.
Well, I think, and that's why I asked that Chris be allowed to make the presentation. He's done a phenomenal job with the staff, with Nina and Jennifer this year, managing this grant. It's very quick, and it's a reapplication every year now on this 5-year grant. We were very fortunate. The governor's office evidently deems that we are moving forward in a positive way, and so we're excited about it, but it definitely is a complex grant to keep up with.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? If not, is there a motion to approve item 6E? Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Item 6F, consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board relating to the approval of contracts for the work-study mentorship program. Dr. Laredo.
Let me remind you that in June, you approved and gave us the authority to use the $5 million that we will receive in work-study funds over the next 2 years of the biennium, using $2.5 million each year of the biennium. Approval was granted to do that. As we work through our CACG grant, our original intent was to utilize the money we receive in developmental education as a match for that grant. As we reviewed that funding from DevEd, what happens when you use match in money for the federal grant you have, it requires an inordinate amount of bookkeeping to ensure that the match you're using is acceptable for the federal contract you have. We faced a problem because in developmental education, we also have money in there that is related to professional development. For an institution to have to track this money to provide the necessary paperwork for us to submit to the federal government as proof of our match became overwhelming. And it scared us because we did not want to do what was not appropriate. So I approached Dan Weaver and asked for assistance to see if there was any possibility that I might be able to receive additional work-study money. Work-study money is easier to track and very clean in tracking in terms of the institutions hiring the students as mentors and then showing that connection to the payment, to the hours the student works, etc. That is not difficult. And so we ended up coming to the table to discuss this, and it was deemed more appropriate that I come back to you as a committee so that you see the transparency and what we are trying to do. $1.7 million was identified that could be utilized of those work-study matching money to be brought forth back to you to increase that original amount that you had approved in June by that 1.7 million. And so what you see before you in the blue pages is the layout, so that instead of the 5 million you approved, you would be approving 6.7 million. The additional 1.7 million will only be used in the first year of this biennium. We're not asking for an additional 1.7 for the second year, but that additional amount will increase the 2.5 million that you've authorized us to spend by an additional 1.7, which then will bring it up to 4.2 million. And so what you have is a listing of the institutions who will be receiving these funds the first year as well as the second year. It decreases the second year because we're not going to have that 1.7 million the second year. It's only the first year. That is the money, along with the 2.5 million that you authorize that we will be using as our match for our CACG grant. It is auditable, it is accountable, and it does not make it complex in ensuring that we protect not only the program but the funds that we're going to be given from the federal government but also from the state. So that's why I come before you today, to allow me to add that 1.7 million to that first year so that we may move forward with our program. You know that our mentorship money with work study you approved is going to be used with our 11 Avid sites, plus all the other sites that you see listed. And it, as I said, this is to make it very clear. That's why we laid it out so carefully, so there would be no question as to how that money was assigned.
Questions? Is there a motion for approval of item 6F?
So moved.
Your second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item G, H, I, J, K, and L were all on the consent calendar. Okay. Gee, okay. Okay. The next item on the agenda is lunch. What is the board's? I think we maybe need to keep going at this time. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, let's plow through it.
Okay. Well, in that case,
this was probably the shortest Closing the Gaps committee meeting.
Thank you. Yeah. Why don't we take about a 5-minute break? If that's all right with everyone. Keep on plugging. Okay, we're back in order. Going to move to item 8 now, matters relating to the Committee on Strategic Planning and Policy. Dr. Lynn Phillips, as we mentioned earlier, was not able to be here today, so I'll take care of this one too. Let's see. this point, I'd like to take just a few minutes and have McGregor update us on the revised doctoral program approval process. McGregor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Heldenfels had requested that we provide the board members with an updated list of those institutions that had submitted proposals to the board for consideration of new doctoral programs prior to the revised task force's recommendations for how we look at the undergraduate success rates, success criteria in approving or disapproving new doctoral programs. And so at each of your places you have a set of documents that lists the programs under consideration at this meeting and the programs that are still in the queue that would not be subject to the undergraduate success criteria before their consideration. You can also see that we have included the same information that we've provided in the past, showing which institutions would need to submit additional documentation if they did not meet the statewide graduation rate, and what their overall graduation and success criteria measures were in those specific areas. We should have the rest of these that are still in process within the next 6 months or so, that we'll have final determinations on those as well. And from that point forward, then every program will be subject to the undergraduate success criteria. And that's the report, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions?
So these will be the only grandfathered?
Yes, sir, that's correct. These are the only ones that are left. Yes, sir.
Very good. There's no action on that item, correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay. Item 8B 1 through 3 were approved by the Committee on Strategic Planning and Policy at their June meeting. Does anyone have any questions on these? This is just for informational purposes only. No questions. All right. Item 8C, items 1 and 2 is a report on facilities decisions of projects certified to meet the requirements of the expedited process for approval. Tom Keaton, Program Director, Finance and Resource Planning is available for questions. At least I think he is.
I can answer any
questions
that come
Susan.
up. This is a new process, and there's rules being adopted or being proposed further on in the agenda. These are some rules that are a statute that was passed, SB 5, and so there are some facilities. Basically, they have to meet all of the criteria for all of our projects as they currently stand before they can go on this expedited process. And we'll talk some more about this under item S, but these are the projects that we have received up to this point that fall into this category.
Okay, are there any questions, comments? And again, there's no action of the board, Susan, is that correct on this particular item?
Correct, no action needed.
Okay. If there's no comment, we'll move to item 8D, is a report on facilities decisions by the Commissioner or Assistant Commissioner since the previous board meeting. Again, this is for informational purposes only. Any questions? Any comments? If not, we'll move to item 8E, is on the consent calendar. Item 8F is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the board relating to the certification of the Texas Research Incentive Program gift funds to the Emerging Research University. Susan Brown.
And McGregor is actually helping me by passing out some information. We didn't get this out earlier because we just came hot off the presses. Basically, for the TRIP program, institutions, the 7 emerging research institutions are allowed to submit matching fund requests. We do a review. Part of that process includes sending all of those requests out to the other institutions so that we can get their comments on them. We have just gotten those back. We had some clarifying questions for some of them. We got those back. I will go through each of the columns in the handout. The first 2 columns are what the amount of money that was distributed in FY10 and FY11. The next 2 columns are FY12 and FY13. That's the amount of money that was appropriated and which institutions will receive the amount of money in 12. The reason you can see an amount to be distributed in FY13 is that we have already received enough matchable funds from the institutions or projects from the institutions to take up all but $1.2 million out of the FY13 amount appropriated. And so this is the amount, and we can go into the individual projects if you would like to, but this is in summary how much each institution will get in FY12. And our plan is to get that out to the institutions on September 1st or as soon afterwards as possible.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Susan, can you just remind the board as to how the certification process works?
Basically, an institution, it has to be a gift. It has to be research oriented. It can be an endowment for graduate students or an endowed chair in a specific field, but it has to be a gift. It has to be for research. And then we look at it and make sure that it meets those criteria. There's different levels of funding, so if it's $100,000, they get matched at 50%. If it's, I can't remember the next threshold, $200,000, it's 75%. It's $1 million or better, it's 100% match. So you go back and forth on what they're submitting, on the types of, on the grants that they're getting. Each of these 7 emerging research institutions are receiving. So they're going out and trying to collect money to match, to get the state match, to be able to get the state match. And so then what we do is, once we get them all in, we send them out to the institutions for the institutions to review. And if they have, any of the other institutions have questions, we do a 3-person internal review of what questions they have. Do we think that it meets the criteria and that sort of thing?
And it's if I remember, it's almost a first in.
It is a first in, first out. So the money comes in. Now, all the institutions are encouraged to continue collecting the funds and submitting the paperwork to us, and then we just, like, part of what is going to be allocated or distributed in FY12 was actually collected back in 10, right? So that we will continue, and as the legislature continues to fund, we will continue to fund as we get additional money.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, is there a motion to approve item 8F? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8G was on the consent calendar. Item 8H is an update on the coordinating board's recommendation for the 82nd Texas Legislature regular session. Since we heard earlier from Susan Brown on the higher education budget outcomes of the 82nd Legislature, and later we will hear from Arturo Alonso on the coordinating board's budget for fiscal year 2012, this agenda item will focus on the key legislation that was passed during the session. Dominic Chavez, Senior Director of External Affairs, will provide this update. Dominic.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Since there's been a lot of discussion about, as part of the major policy discussion, some of the legislation that passed came up in that as well. I'll try to keep this brief and of course, answer any questions as they come up. As you will recall, last October, this board adopted a series of recommendations for the legislature to consider going into this 82nd session. The major themes that came out of that were essentially finding ways to improve cost efficiency in higher education, as well as improving student success via a variety of different methods, be it outcomes-based funding, improving developmental education, as well as implementing a number of the recommendations from the cost efficiency study that the board adopted last year. The conversation at the legislature this session, as you can imagine, mostly focused on the budget, and you've seen some of the numbers, and you'll discuss that a little more in detail later in the agenda. But the budget obviously dominated a lot of the deliberation. Cost efficiencies were also a big discussion because the institutions were looking for relief in many ways from some of the administrative burdens and issues that they have to deal with that cost money. You heard a presentation earlier from about the lean process and some of the things the institutions did. And so one major piece of legislation that has come out of this session was Senate Bill 5. You'll be discussing some rules related to that later in the agenda. Senate Bill 5 was an omnibus cost efficiency bill that tried to identify ways and eliminate reporting requirements that were unnecessary and identify ways to improve efficiencies at our institutions. In terms of some of the recommendations that this board looked at, one was obviously the Texas Grant Priority Model. You'll recall last session we made the case that certain academic standards should be applied to the Texas Grant Program to strengthen not only the preparedness of students but also to ensure ultimate success in college. This session, that bill was finally passed in Senate Bill 28, the Texas Grant College Readiness Reform Act that Senator Zaffarini and Representative Chairman Branch sponsored in the House. Again, they adopted, I believe, almost virtually the exact recommendation that this board made last October, and so that was an important step, and it was passed overwhelmingly in the legislature, which was also, I think, a recognition of the hard work that this board and the leadership did during the interim to make the case for why this was an important step. In terms of developmental education, this was one area that was actually a surprise going into session. We weren't really expecting much movement on developmental education, in part because, as some of you have heard, we have a number of demonstration projects. We're testing best practices right now at our institutions. But as it turns out, many legislative leaders were very interested in seeing better results and seeing them more quickly. And so we had a number of developmental education bills that went through session, most notably House Bill 1244, which was an effort by Representative Joaquin Castro and Senator Royce West. This bill is going to give the coordinating board some tools and authority to implement many of the best practices that we're currently starting to see results from the institutions, and it is really going to give us a head start, if you will, before we were really anticipating having these tools in terms of getting some real results out of developmental education reform. And so that was another kind of surprise as we went through session. The last piece of legislation I want to highlight was House Bill 3025. This was some legislation that, as it started out, we had a discussion earlier on in the major policy discussion about improving transfers and improving the pathway between community colleges and universities. House Bill 3025, which was authored by Chairman Branch, really established at the beginning of session a number of tools that were going to help us achieve that, or at least get us closer to having a truer 2+2 system. Unfortunately, it came down late in the session, and as it always does, it may have been a bigger bite at the apple than the Senate was willing to take at the time, because there were a lot of moving parts in that legislation. So at the last minute, that legislation was scaled back fairly significantly. So it did not achieve all the tools and all the outcomes that we were hoping from it. But there were two key components that did survive. One was one of the key recommendations from the cost efficiency study, which was mandating degree plans. So now students will be required to follow a degree plan after 45 semester credit hours of work, and that will require certain amounts and certain levels of advising to change that degree plan. And so that was an important component that survived. And also there was a component to facilitate more directly reverse transfers. The idea that if we're going to, if community college students will move up to a university, that those universities, upon those students receiving a certain amount of credit, that they identify and then send back to the community college transcripts to basically award those students what they've earned. That if they've earned enough hours for an associate's and maybe they weren't aware of it, that there's a pathway now, at least on a statewide basis, where that will be facilitated in a more direct way. So that was there was important gains out of that legislation. It certainly didn't go as far as we were hoping, but as you see, I believe the discussion and the impetus for improving the 2+2 system is out there. It was just a function of too much too late in terms of the session and how we ended up. So with that, you know, those were some of the key. There's one more I do want to mention, because you're going to hear more about this, particularly at your, I'm sure, your October board meeting, and you'll hear about it as we approach the November election. We were, and this was something else that was an important piece of legislation, given the reductions that we've seen in financial aid. You're aware of our college access loan program, the Hinson Hazelwood loan program that the coordinating board administers and has for some 40 years. Senator West helped us pass some legislation that will significantly expand our reach in terms of that program, both in terms of the amount of money that we'll be able to put on the street, if you will, for students to take low interest loans and help them bridge that gap in terms of capital for higher education. And it also prevents us from having to go back to the voters every couple years. It's going to give us a larger window to work with so that we can provide more stability in the program. The one caveat is to execute these two changes, we have to go to the voters this November. And so we'll be talking more with the board in the coming months about that, and that's going to be a key election for the coordinating board in terms of making sure that program is as robust as it can be, particularly in this environment where we're facing tighter resources in the financial aid arena. So in short, those are some of the key highlights. Again, you've talked about many of the bills. In fact, you're going to go through a lot of the rules and so some of this other bills that passed will be discussed in those contexts. But I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything in any of these bills, and I don't even know whether it's necessary that it be in the form of a law, but is there anything here that would give us the additional incentives or the tools necessary to do a better job in tracking student success measures, particularly graduation rates from students that may transfer from a community college to maybe an institution outside the state? Do we have any of that in these bills, that are any tools there that would perhaps enhance our ability to do that?
I'm going to defer a little to Susan because she probably speak to that. In terms of legislation, no. We were asking for an exceptional item very early in the session when we were able to throw out our wish list, but that very quickly got sidetracked. We were requesting funding that we could tap into a national database and the clearinghouse that Susan can address.
Right. There is a national clearinghouse. It's called the National Student Clearinghouse. Unfortunately, it costs about $200,000 a year. But it does allow us to track students that will go out of state to most institutions out of state, not all of them. There are some institutions that don't participate in that clearinghouse because on the institution side, they also have to pay to participate. So there are some that don't do that. So at this point, we really can't track students out of state. We track them obviously to private and state. We can now track them to the career colleges, University of Phoenix, DeVry, some of those, but we can't get them when they go out of state. We do lose track of them at that point.
So some of the numbers that we're actually seeing then with regard to closing the gaps in graduation rates may be a little bit underestimated then. If it may not be overly significant, but there's a possibility that some of those numbers may be underestimated.
They could be. And in Texas, we actually do a better job than most states. Most states do not collect information from their independent colleges. So really, Texas is one of the very few states that tracks them among even public institutions, let alone into the independent colleges and universities. So
we do have a mechanism now to track complete graduation rates among the private institutions.
Yes, we
that
do.
Transfer
yes, we
from
do.
public community colleges.
Yes,
Is that
we
what
do.
you're saying? Okay, but we do not have a means of counting the number of completions if those students transfer from two-year institutions to out-of-state.
Correct. We don't.
Okay. That may be something that we want to consider in terms of funding request in the next legislative session.
And
you're saying it's 200. The means is, you're telling me there is a means to doing it. We just don't have the resources in place right now to do it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and one of the things that, and David just reminded, we have done that in the past. We did get a grant at one point that allowed us to collect it for a year or two, and actually about 7% of our high school graduates even go out of state. So we only, and those are the ones that go. We do find students who come back into the graduated from high school in Texas. We lose them for a year or so, and then they come back into the state. But they're coming back into the state as a sophomore or as a junior.
Or they showing?
So they're going out of state and then they're coming back, or they're going somewhere and coming back.
They'll show up once they graduate from a Texas.
If they graduate from a Texas, okay. So we do capture that.
We capture that. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
I just wanted to point out we have some data on what happens to Texas students who go out of state. For example, the College Board compiles data on students who go to high school in Texas and identifies the leading institutions from out of state where students have taken the SAT and enroll in out-of-state university. So we have some data, but the important point is, it doesn't address your question, but the rate of Texas students who go to an institution of higher education out of state is very low compared to what happens in most states. She said 7%.
It was about 7%.
Where there are a lot of states that have rates of 35%, 38%. So it's quite low.
Mr. Chairman, I'll close with two quick comments. One, dovetailing off the comments about the data. One of the reasons I believe that we were, and I've heard this over and over again in talking with legislative offices, one of the reasons I believe that we were relatively successful from a policy standpoint in making the case for a lot of the changes that were adopted and a lot of the changes that are under consideration is because we have good data. And I will tell you, with the Texas Grant Priority discussion, where we were 2 years prior in the session and how we were able to, basically turn that tanker, it was because of the data, and we were able to demonstrate very clearly impacts. And I think that's not only telling for what was accomplished and what we did this session, but I think it's also going to be very critical as we move forward in talking with the major policy discussion issues, because the fact of the matter is people are recognizing that Texas does have one of the best data systems in the country, and other states have told us that. So that's one thing. And then the second, I'll just point out, you can read to your heart's content. I think a copy was provided to you, and this is actually one of our most popular documents we produce at the coordinating board, other than all McGregor's wonderful work.
Thank
you. This is I will tell you, this is a compilation of a lot of hard work on staff, and I want to recognize not only the staffs throughout the agency that help do these summaries, but also John Wyatt on our staff that put together all the funding information, and Lizette Montiel who basically put all this together. It is a very popular document. If you have any questions about any piece of legislation related to higher education, it's here. It's also online and hyperlinked and easy to use, so for those listening out in the hinterlands, we'll be distributing this widely and as far as we can. So with that, I close.
Very good. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to really recognize Dom, Linda, Lizette, the whole crew. I'm probably leaving somebody out, but we had decided this session was going to be a huge policy session, and we didn't get everything we were shooting for, but great. Just as we did prior session, wonderful groundwork's been laid, and I would also include, I don't know if Fred's listening, but Fred did a yeoman's job. Let me tell you, think he spent probably 50% of his working hours at the Capitol this year on behalf of higher education, along with all these people. So y'all have done a great job, and you know, your report evidences that. So thanks for all the great work you did.
Thank you.
To all of you.
Outstanding. Moving right along, item 8I 1 through 6, we're on the consent agenda. Item 8J through Q, we're also on the consent agenda. That'll take us to agenda item 8R, the consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the Board relating to proposed amendments to Chapter 4, rules applying to all public institutions of higher education in Texas, Subchapter A, General Provision, Section 4.11, the Board rules concerning common admission application forms. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. In talking with the General Counsel's office, I wanted to put everything on consent, but he said since this hadn't gone to the SPP committee that he felt like we probably ought to bring it here. But this item actually is very straightforward. We're simply trying to change the billing deadlines for the Apply Texas funding that comes in from individual institutions to pay for our ongoing contract with the University of Texas. We're simply trying to give the institutions a little bit more time to pay the funds, and as this is handled financially, it just makes more sense for us to do this and to give the institutions a little bit bigger window for payment. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Questions, comments? Not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 8R2 is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the Board excuse me, relating to proposed amendments to Chapter 4, rules applying to all public institutions of higher education, Subchapter P, Section 4.264, of Board rules concerning formula funding general provisions. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item is in response to legislation that passed in the current most recent session. This provides that formula funding is allowed for Texas A&M University Texarkana students who are may be residing out of state, but who are taking face-to-face courses on the campus, or who are taking distance education courses, but live in the county contiguous to the county. In other words, the Arkansas county that's contiguous to the Texas county where A&M Texarkana is located. And this is similar to some other funding options or admissions options that we have with reciprocity for other states or proximate counties in which universities or community colleges are located. And this is just simply a codification or a codification in our rules of the statute that passed in the session.
Any discussion? Not, is there a motion for approval?
So move.
There's a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8R3 is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the Board relating to amendments to Chapter 13, Financial Planning, Subchapter H, Reporting of Tuition and Fees, Section 13.142 of Board Rules concerning definitions. Dan Weaver, Jane Caldwell are here to answer questions.
Morning. It's great to be here in the morning.
Great. Glad to have you in the morning, too.
We have about 10 upcoming agenda items that, Mr. Chairman, you're going to do a lot of reading. We can answer as many questions as you would like to as we go through each one of them. Just kind of as a broad stroke on all of these, all the rules were posted, and we didn't receive any comments on any of the rules that you're getting ready to go through. Jane, I just as a point of recognition, probably spends more time working on rules as a result of legislation as anybody else in the coordinating board, and it's exhausting and tiring. I certainly appreciate her efforts. So we'll go through in as much detail as you would like to and give maybe a really brief summary of each particular one as they're read, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has on any particular issue that comes up.
If you could just kind of give us a recap of what you're proposing, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Jane.
Okay.
Agenda item 8R3 has to do with a couple of definitions that were added to our section of rules dealing with reporting of tuition and fees. We were asked to add definitions for exemptions and waivers. These are terms that are used quite a bit and somewhat indiscriminately, and trying to add some consistency in how they're defined and used was the purpose. And therefore, we have added those we've proposed adding those to the rules.
Questions? Not, is there a motion to approve agenda item 8R3?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8R.
Item 8R has to do with revisions to our rules dealing with residency. Our primary goal was to remove from those rules the rules that we have on waiver programs. You will see those in a moment as a separate item. We thought that having waivers as a separate item where they're more easily located by the public would improve their utilization by the institutions and general public. We also have a few cleanup changes within the residency rules. One of them had to do with military helping to identify the approaches for determining residency for persons in the military. These have been generally known by word of mouth, but not in rule in the past. And then we also added a bit of clarity to the definition of property that can be used as a basis for establishing domicile in Texas, and that we indicated it was residential real property as opposed to non-residential property.
Questions? Is there a motion to approve item 8R4?
So move.
Second. And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8R5.
8R5 has to do with the new adoption of the waiver rules as a separate chapter or subchapter in our rules. By moving them to a separate subchapter, we're able in the section listing to individually identify programs and list them alphabetically. Again, we're just trying to make this information more easily accessible to the users. And then within each program, we tried to add a consistent structure, which would be to identify the enabling legislation, identify eligible persons, institutions, and the resulting impact on the tuition paid per program.
Questions? If none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8R6.
8R6 adds books to what's eligible to be used for emergency loans.
Books. Kind of hard to go to school without books, huh?
Couldn't take out an emergency loan to pay for them, however.
Right. Okay. Any discussion? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8R7.
Item 8R7 has to do with rules for the Early High School Graduation Scholarship Program. This program is one of those that is zero funded for the coming biennium, and we wanted to adopt a change to these rules to indicate that they only applied to the previous program as it had existed. If funding does get added for the program, we'll probably want to come back with revised rules that are cleaner and ready to go with the new world that we'll face at that time.
So if you hadn't graduated by June 20th of 2011,
you're in trouble.
Okay.
There is no funding,
Okay.
and in fact, for those who graduated earlier to that time, they have until August 31st to get money this year.
okay. Any questions? If not, is there a motion to approve item 8R7?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8R8.
Item 8R8 has to do with the educational aid exemption program. This one was not zero funded, but it was changed from being funded through the foundation program to relying on gifts and donations. The rules had previously had a significant amount of information of the process of how the program or the awards would be made. That would not apply in the case of what we expect to be limited funding through gifts and donations. So the changes, the proposed changes, are to accommodate a much smaller amount of money in the program.
Questions? If not, is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of item 8R8, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8R9.
Item 8R9 has to do with our rules for the Hazelwood Act, which is the state's exemption program for the veterans and their families. Most of the changes were the result of new legislation passed this last session. One of them had to deal with the one subset of the Hazelwood Act is what's referred to as the legacy program. It allows a veteran who chooses not to use his or her hours to assign those hours to a child. One of the things that came up almost immediately when that was authorized a few years ago was what happens if the veteran dies before he's able to assign those hours. And one of the changes from Senate Bill 639 was to authorize the surviving spouse or a guardian to assign those hours to a child under those circumstances. There were also changes to the definition of a child. That definition also had been only applicable to the legacy program, this assignment program, and the new legislation provides indicates that those provisions apply to all of Hazelwood dependents using the program.
Questions? If not, is there a motion to approve item 8R9? Second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8R10.
That's mine.
Yes, sir.
This is revisions to the Armed Services Scholarship Program. Primarily, it expands the list of the Texas military forces that are eligible for scholarships, includes the Texas State Guard, in addition to the United States Coast Guard and the Merchant Marines. It expands the ability for students to participate in the program as not first-time entering freshmen, so I can be a transfer student and have access to the Armed Services Scholarship Program. And it also clarifies some of the language with regard to the award amount, whereas it's not up to perhaps the full cost of attendance. Right now the awards are $10,000. The language in the statute was revised to make it easier for institutions to grant smaller awards and still have a student be able to get the scholarship.
Questions?
Yes, Chairman. Just curious, Nan, were all these awarded?
No,
or was
sir.
there excess money left?
There are 185 potential awards. There were 83 awards made during the last
academic year. Is that the reason for the expansion here? Do we think we missed some people young people, because we had not, it was not as broad as.
There were a few students that were identified as being potential recipients on campus that I guess from the target range of what the program was originally intended for, were not in the original intent, but there are students that could benefit from the program.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to approve item 8R10?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8R11.
Item 8R11 is reflecting changes to the tuition equalization grant program rules as a result, of new legislation passed this last session. Mainly that bill, House Bill 2907, was a cleanup bill, and there's some minor adjustments in the wording in our rules to reflect those legislative changes.
Any questions? Not, is there a motion to approve item 8R11? There's a second here. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8R12.
Item 8R12 is reflecting changes from legislation passed this last session regarding the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant. This is our 2-year college grant for public institutions. The previous language in statute would indicate that if a person were eligible to get a Texas grant, whether or not he or she received it, he or she could not get a TEOG. And the change in statute indicates mainly that you can't concurrently get both. So we had students in the past who, because of insufficient funding, they were eligible for Texas grant but didn't get one, but because of the old statute also could not get TEOG. This now solves that problem for them.
Interesting.
Okay. Questions?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Item 8R12 is approved. Item 8R13.
8R13 makes a very minor adjustment to the rules for the Peace Officer Exemption Program. In 2009, the Firefighter Exemption Program statute was expanded to add a Peace Officer exemption. And over time, what we discovered is that the two bills that adjusted the firefighter exemption and the peace officer one were competing for the statute, and it had some conflicts as to which one would override the other as time passes. In this last session, a new bill was passed to give these two programs their unique citations in the education code, so that conflict has been resolved. All we did in this rule was correct the citation for the peace officer program.
Questions? Not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Item 8R13 is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 8S, emergency rules resulting from the 82nd Texas legislative session. Item 8S1 is consideration of adopting on an emergency basis the Commissioner's recommendation to the Board relating to amendments to Chapter 13, Financial Planning, Subchapter E, Tuition Rebates for Certain Undergraduates, Section 13.82 of Board Rules concerning eligible students. It's from SB 176, 82nd Texas Legislature regular session. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This revision is to provide clarification on which hours may be exempted from the total number of hours a student may earn and still remain eligible for the tuition rebate. Currently, if a student graduates within 3 semester credit hours of their bachelor's degree requirements, they are eligible for the tuition rebate. This provision, based upon the legislation from the last session, also excludes courses that the student took for high school credit while still in high school, so dual credit courses. from being considered, and also clarifies changes that were made in the last legislative session regarding courses for reserve officer training, and also courses taken exclusively by for credit by examination. There is a limit of 9 hours that may be earned through credit by examination before they begin to count toward toward the 3 extra hours, 120 or however many many credits are required for the degree. This change is coming up for emergency approval this round. We will then post the rules for consideration and comment from the public, and then bring the rules and any necessary revisions back to you all for the September SPP and October board meeting. And so this is kind of the first round for emergency purposes, and then we'll do the follow-up and any cleanup with revisions made based upon institutional comments.
Any questions? Not. Is there a motion to approve item 8S1? Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8S2 is consideration of adopting on an emergency basis the Commissioner's recommendation to the Board relating to proposed amendments to Chapter 17, Resource Planning, Subchapter B, Board Approval, Section 17.5 of Board Rules concerning expedited process for certain projects. SB 5, 82nd Texas Legislature Regular Session. Susan Brown.
And there is going to be, or we're suggesting that there be one minor change to this rule as it's laid out under Section E of this rule. We would like to add a audit thing. It says an audit pursuant to Chapter 17 may be conducted to ensure the sufficiency of any such certification. Basically, what this rule does is it says that if an institution meets all of the current standards, board standards, they submit all the paperwork to us, we certify that they've met all these standards, then they get what is considered an expedited approval. So they are automatically approved if they meet all of our current standards. What this one minor change would do would allow us to go out and say, and verify that they really are meeting these standards. And that's what the change would do. I don't think it's something that we would use a whole lot, but if we have an institution that submits a project that meets all of our standards, and then they come back in 3 weeks later or a month later and say, oops, we forgot to include these costs, the project's going up, and now, going back over and over, at that point, then we could say, okay, we need to go in and audit and find out what's really going on. I don't think this is something that would be used very often, but it is something that we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to do.
So, Susan, can I ask a clarifying point? Sure. My understanding from our earlier discussion is that the intent of the legislature was to reduce the amount of paperwork if you meet all the standards. And the intention of this slight modification of the audit will not increase the paperwork at all for the institution. So we are still accomplishing what the original intent of the legislature was.
Correct.
All we're saying is if we run across a situation which would probably be in the minority, which would be outside, whether it's space utilization or some other one of our other requirements, that we would have the ability at that point to audit and to have that discussion with the institution at that point. And what would happen to the expedited process for that institution? Can you just walk us through if that were to happen so we understand?
Right. And as I said, I don't think this is something that's going to happen very often. But if an institution comes in and they say, okay, we certify that we meet all of the current board criteria, and we look at it and our data that we have shows that there's been a lot of variation and that they keep coming back for a reapproval where all of a sudden they wouldn't meet the criteria, or if we have new data that shows that they don't meet some of those criteria, this allows us to say, okay, let's go out and audit. And what we would probably do is pull a couple of people from institutions, go visit that institution, have that discussion with them, and make a determination at that time whether, yes, they really do meet the criteria, and it would go through with the expedited process, or it would be something that we would move up the chain of command, talk to the commissioner about, talk to the board about. I don't think this is something that's going to happen very often, but we want to make sure that we can ensure that the institutions really are complying with all the certifications.
It facilitates our due diligence.
But if I understood correctly, you said to bring it back to the board. I mean, it won't really be brought back to the board.
If we do determine that they meet all the criteria, it would just move on through the process. It would go through the expedited. It would be approved. If the staff and the peer review team do not feel that they really do meet those criteria and that it wouldn't be eligible for this process in the first place, then we will discuss it obviously with the institution, the commissioner, and talk to the board members about it. Part of the intent of the legislation was currently, in order to get something on the calendar for the committee, for approval at the committee or the board level, they have to submit it, I believe it's 80 days before the board meeting. And so if they have something that meets all of the standards that as set by the board, and they still have to wait until the board meeting before it's actually approved. And so this allows them to go ahead and move forward with the project if it meets all the criteria, but we still need to make sure that it really does meet all of the standards as set forth by the board. And the legislation acknowledges that those standards are important and that they do need to continue meeting those standards.
Okay, but on a historical basis, if I understood you earlier when we were discussing this, if a project met all of those requirements on a historical basis, we haven't, as a board, turned those down.
You have not turned those down, and they have, in general, been on the consent calendar.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? If not, is there a motion to, let's see, what do you want?
I'll read it.
You want to?
Bill, you can guide me here. I guess I would make the motion to approve agenda item 8S2 as drafted, with an addition that there would be an audit pursuant to Chapter 17, which may be conducted to ensure the sufficiency of any such certification.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. So your motion is to approve item 8S2 as amended. Okay. Any further discussion? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. Item 8S3 is consideration of adopting on an emergency basis the Commissioner's recommendation to the Board relating to amendments to Chapter 21, Student Services, Subchapter T, the vaccination against bacterial meningitis for students approved to reside on campus, in on-campus dormitories or other on-campus housing facilities at institutions of higher education. Section 21.610 to 21.614 of Board Rules concerning the vaccination against bacterial meningitis for entering students at public or private or independent institutions of higher education. This was SB 1107, 82nd Texas Legislature regular session. McGregor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. These were revisions to the bill that passed in the 81st legislative session, which established the requirement for bacterial meningitis vaccinations for students who were residing in on-campus housing. The most recent bill in the 82nd expands this to any first-time entering student of an institution of higher education. So it does provide a much more broad reach and much greater requirement. What the rules provide is that new students in just basically puts into the rules everything that was in the statute and tries to explicitly define who is going to be involved and how the bacterial meningitis evidence of vaccination may be shown. That part is fairly straightforward. I will say that we have been working with the TACRO and the Community College Association with Ray Garcia on trying to identify some challenges that we face with continuing education. So a cooking course that a student might go in and take for a 2-hour period in an evening, under the way that the rules are currently written, would be included, and the student would have to be vaccinated prior to taking that continuing education course. We're working with the Community College Association and with the registrars on looking at ways that we might be able to define this more narrowly, and also working with the legislative sponsors of the legislation, and in talking with staff members at those offices, they seem to feel like that this was not the intent to incorporate all of continuing education. And so when we come back to you for September at the SBP meeting, we will have gotten comments from institutions, and we'll have a better idea of how we're going to try and carry these rules forward at that time. This is strictly for emergency rulemaking authority going forward, and more than likely we will be bringing revisions back to you for the September SPP.
Questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to approve item 8S3? Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8T, report on proposals approved by the Commissioner or Assistant Commissioner since the previous board meeting. This is an information item only. The approval items are attached or are in your board packages. Is there any particular question or comment? If not, we'll move to item 8U. It's a report on the agency's sunset review process. Dominic, you're back in the hot seat here. Dominic Chavez, Senior Director of External Relations, will provide information to us.
I apologize. I don't want to keep everyone from lunch, but I'll turn that on. There we go. I just want to give a quick update to the board about the sunset review process that the agency is now undergoing over the next about 2-year process leading into next session. As you know, every state agency is required to go through sunset review every 12 years to technically be reauthorized by statute. The idea is that the state wants to evaluate the functions and programs and operations of every state agency to make a determination whether those should continue or not. So it is a normal process that this agency goes through. The last time we went through the review was during the period of 2001 to 2003 when we were reauthorized in 2003 during that legislative session. We technically were not supposed to be back on the for sunset review until 2015 session. But this session there was some reshuffling of the Sunset Review Commission's schedule. It was not arbitrary. We weren't singled out. There was a lot of agencies that were moved up, some moved back, and we were moved up 2 years, and so that's why we're here now. In most cases, these reviews, particularly in an environment where there's cost cutting and questions about agencies and efficiencies, often these can be very defensive in nature. But I think the chair and the commissioner have set a clear tone that we should embrace this review as an opportunity to kind of tell our story, outline a vision for the future of higher education generally, and the agency specifically, and use this process as yet another platform to articulate the importance of higher education and how we can reinvent it to better position Texas as a national leader and global competitor. And so basically the way this process will work is it is going to starts now and goes through essentially the end of next legislative session in 2013. There are roughly 4 phases involved. The first is the self-evaluation. The second is a staff review by the commission staff itself. The third is a public hearing, and the fourth is the sunset legislation as it moves through the process. We are currently in the first phase of this process. The self-evaluation is just that. It is basically a written report that's delivered to the commission and describes in pretty extraordinary detail the operations and functions of this agency. It also includes kind of an initial outline of what the agency believes should be done relative to operations, relative to changes in statute and programs, and whether or not things should be altered or amended going forward. This report is due on September 1, and so we're in the process of developing that right now. I will tell you it is labor intensive. There are a lot of staff throughout this agency that are cranking through this, in addition to all this hard work that you see on the agenda. So I do want to point that out, that this is not while it's a great opportunity, it's also labor intensive opportunity, and so we'll continue to work our way through that. The second phase is basically the staff review. They will essentially set up a team of staff members from the Sunset Commission that will be assigned to our agency, and this is really where they will literally come down to the agency, to this building, and pop open the hood and look around and meet with senior leaders, meet with every division, understand the operations. I suspect they may want to talk to some board members. They will talk to stakeholders. They don't just talk to the agency, but they also find out who's your customers and who are your stakeholders, because we want to understand how are you responsive to them, and what should this agency be doing differently. And so that will be part of that process as well. And really the third phase then we move into is the public hearing phase, and this really sets up a preliminary report from the staff after they've done their due diligence by reviewing the self-evaluation report and going over the information that they've compiled from these interviews and understanding the agency. They will put forward an initial review and recommendation, not just in terms of the big question of whether or not this agency should continue, but also in terms of changes that ought to be made relative to the agency and its functions. This public hearing is conducted in front of the commission itself. The commission is 12 members, 5 members from the Senate, 5 from the House, and 2 public members. Currently it's Chairman Hagar and is the chairman of the Sunset Commission, Senator Hagar I should say, and Representative Bonin from the House is the vice chair. Again, that public hearing process is just another opportunity for, I suspect, the chairman and the commissioner will be called, perhaps even the vice chair, to testify about the agency and its importance and other issues. And then finally, the last phase is the commission will make a final recommendation as to whether the agency should exist or not, and any other changes that should go along with that. And that's when we move into the last phase, which is the sunset legislation that will proceed through the session. And again, because we technically need to have legislation to be reauthorized, so that is a necessary step, that legislation often becomes a legislative Christmas tree as it moves through the process, because it opens up everything about higher education in this agency. And so any possible change, whether the recommendations the coordinating board makes or recommendations from others, that legislation is a easy vehicle to achieve those changes. And so that process should wrap up by the end of session, and the agency will either be reauthorized or it won't. And so in a nutshell, that is the sunset review process. As I said, we are barreling down towards that September 1 deadline to issue that first report. We're working on compiling that information. I believe we will be sharing that information as we get to a reasonable draft, so that you can kind of review the information that we're putting together. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, comments? Thank you very much, Dom. Okay. Item 9, matters relating to the Committee on Agency Operations. And I'm sure you're going to hate this, but committee is chaired by Whit Ryder. This will be the last and final.
And it will be quick. Okay, so we can get us to lunch. Again, I think everybody on the board was here, with exception Joe couldn't be with us yesterday afternoon. And so a lot of the things that we're approving are items that we have already seen yesterday. But Joe, obviously, since you weren't encouraged to ask any questions, we go through these agenda items. It's your last stab also at it. So during our meeting yesterday, we got what I would call our normal recurring reports from Dr. Alonzo. We got an update on the ARA funds. We had our financial reporting. He gave an update on facilities and also talked about some of the lean work that's being done here within the agency itself. We also, and I'm pleased to report this, we had a report from KPMG, Susan Warren, and I'm pleased to report to the board and to the audience that we received an unqualified opinion that was totally clean with no comments at all. And again, Joe, you were not here yesterday, but we publicly recognized you yesterday because you were a key driver in that whole audit process, and we've had that audit now. I think, Joe, this is our 5th since 2006, and so as you ride out, you ought to feel awful proud that that the work that's been done in that has really just resulted in, I think, great benefits. Better internal controls in our agency, and so we thank you for all that work. So the committee also approved the internal audit plan for fiscal year 2012, and none of those items that I've talked about require formal board approval today. The first item, though, is agenda item 10B. And that is consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board regarding the coordinating board's operating budget for fiscal year 2012. Yesterday, we got a very detailed presentation of the budget by Dr. Alonzo. I would like to give Dr. Alonzo just a few minutes to give us a brief summary of the fiscal year 2012 budget and then try to answer any questions any of the board members might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The FY12 proposed budget that I laid out yesterday is a total budget of $756,631,827. This budget for FY12 represents a reduction of $188,621,000 less than the budget for the current year, which represents about a 20% reduction. And this is contained in the summary document, in the budget document that I handed out yesterday and that was mailed to you earlier also for your review. The amount of the one change that I went over yesterday that I think I'd like to point out again today is that there was a difference between the document that we sent on July the 8th and the one that we handed out yesterday. And that is represented by an increase of $4.9 million for 2 new programs that were added in the special call session. And those were highlighted, and you can see those on page 12 of your document that were added. The other point that I would like to summarize is that our operating budget consists, and this was mentioned earlier today, of both operating, which is the funds that go to the operation running the agency, and the trustee funds, which are the funds that we pass through to other entities, institutions, and students. The operating budget comprises 4.2% of our total budget, our total appropriation, with trustee funds, pass-through funds being almost 96%. One item that I pointed out yesterday, and I think is I'd like to note again today, is that of our operations budget, only 40% of it is funded by general revenue. In other words, of the total GR that is appropriated to the coordinating board, less than 2% of it goes to operations. So it's a very, very good model. The FTE cap was reduced by the legislature by 36 positions. It went from 311 to 275. As I reported yesterday, all but 8 of those positions were absorbed by elimination of existing vacancies. 8 were absorbed or handled through a reduction in force. The budget before you that the committee approved yesterday and we're asking the board to approve today funds a total of 267 FTEs, which are 8 under the cap that we have. This 8 that we have, as I pointed out, gives us the flexibility to seek external funding and staff any positions that may be necessary as a result of managing those external funds. One of the items that I think needs to be mentioned is that in the budget that you reviewed and in the budget that was that you will approve today, hopefully approve today, includes a $10 million donation gift from the Texas Guaranteed Student Loan Corporation, known as TG, for Texas Grant. And that softens the reduction of the Texas Grant program that the legislature passed. And we certainly want to express our appreciation for TG for that donation. Subsequent to me mailing out the budget for your review on July the 8th, TG board also approved making a $25 million gift to jumpstart the T-STEM program. Because that scholarship program is still, the details are still being worked out and the timing has not been totally worked out, we did not include it in your budget, but we did disclose that we would be coming back to a subsequent AOC meeting for amending the budget to include that gift from TG. But at this time, again, I'd like to express the staff's and the board's appreciation to TG for that donation. We also discuss and answer questions related to the cuts in some of the major programs. And I handed out, and I believe it's at your places for Joe and Dennis, who were not here yesterday, a list of the serial funded programs that were totally eliminated from the budget. Mr. Chairman, that is my summary. I would be most pleased to answer any questions.
Any other questions? Dennis, I didn't mean to leave you out that you weren't here yesterday.
No
you were here in spirit. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions about the budget at all?
Move to approve.
Second.
All of those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by the same sign. Thank you, Arturo. Appreciate that. Agenda item 9C is consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board for a resolution relating to authorizing the filing of one or more applications to obtain a portion of the state's allocation for private activity bonds and the unencumbered state ceiling, and containing other provisions relating to this subject. Dan, you want to give just a quick summary of this, please?
Yes, I'll start with maybe a brief clarification. We couched this yesterday in relationship to Proposition 3 that Dominic just referred to, as far as going to the voters to approve expanded bonding capacity. Mr. Deitloff correctly corrected me after the meeting to say that the application for our allocation is not contingent on passage of Proposition 3, but our use of any of the allocation would be subject to the availability of bonding authority. So the application does not tie necessarily directly to Proposition 3, but how the board chooses to use it subsequent to Proposition 3 would be relative to whether it's approved or not approved. So just a kind of point of a clarification there.
Okay.
This is a request to request allocation from the private activity bond allocation. This is an annual resolution that's passed from the board, and it merely essentially guarantees our access to bonding capacity through the private activity bond allocation process.
Mr. Chairman, what is there a time frame to do this, and is it on a first come first served basis, or how does it?
Yes to multiple of those questions. There are calendar year limitations. There are sub-ceiling limitations within all of the different entities that are able to access the private activity bond allocation. Once an application is made, there's a limitation on how long you have that application, which is 3 years from the time that it's approved. So if this resolution and we exercised our right to take as much as you are authorizing, we would have 3 years from the time that it is approved to actually use the allocation. So it essentially locks in your ability to issue debt up to whatever your other statutory limits might be in that particular case. Normally we operate on a calendar year basis with the private activity bond allocation as opposed to a fiscal year limit. There are certain carry forward dates when the capacity collapses and is made available to the issuers, which normally happens on August 15th. So the long roundabout answer to your question is that there's a lot of different date limitations that are set and that are managed by the Bond Review Board. And this particular one is essentially getting our portion that we are statutorily authorized to within our particular sub-ceiling, but it also is authorizing us to go get any excess that might be available. And then we would hold that until we needed it.
But if I understood correctly from yesterday's meeting, the reduction in the Texas grants will most likely create more of a demand for the loan program?
It has the potential for creating more demand for the loan program. I guess the financial aid, gift aid, federal loans, the college access loan, which is where these funds would be used for, there's a lot of overlapping and disaggregation of financial aid from each particular student's perspective. So I hope that I characterized it yesterday. If I'm a zero EFC student that's getting a full Pell Grant, that's getting a full Texas grant, that still has needs up to cost of attendance, they're going to get a subsidized federal loan, they're going to get a unsubsidized federal loan, and then if they still have need up to cost of attendance, then they may choose to get a college access loan.
Okay.
So that's that particular student. There are other students that don't have access to capital to actually pay their tuition and fee bills when they're due in August. The student that doesn't have access to cash, essentially, would be more likely to avail themselves of these type of loan products.
Okay.
But they're all related. They all are related and intertwined once you start aggregating up all the students that you look at. So one decision impacts every other student in the pipeline. I hope I answered your question.
You did.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at all? If not, could I have a motion for approval of the resolution presented in agenda item 9C? Mr. Hinton?
Second.
Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed by same sign. Thank you. Dan, agenda items 9D and 9E are on the consent calendar, and agenda item 9F is consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board to approve an interagency contract between the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and the Office of the Attorney General for the litigation and collection of delinquent student loans for the 2012-2013 biennium. Dan?
Well, I got excited there for a second. Thought I was going to.
Yeah, you too quick.
We entered into our first interagency agreement with the OAG in 2009. We're about 20 months into that particular agreement. It expires on August 31st. This is a continuation of the formalized relationship between the coordinating board and the OAG to collect our defaulted loans and to essentially litigate our defaulted loan carriers for the next 2 years. The structure of this agreement is very much the same as the structure of our previous agreement. It does increase the number of FTEs at the OAG's office from 8 to 10. Those 2 additional FTEs, which are being handled underneath the OAG's FTE cap, so it's not an impact on the coordinating board's FTE cap, are primarily targeted for post-judgment collections. That's the area that tends to always get the last resource that's available, and it tends to be the resource that's never available. So this is an intentional effort on the OAG's office to put additional resources to collect on borrowers that have already passed all of the other hurdles that we might normally pursue them as far as default collection. So these are loans that are already in judgment. The structure of the agreement also splits the collected attorney's fees that are assessed to borrowers that are litigated. The split historically had been 2/3 to the OAG and 1/3 to the coordinating board. The new agreement is 60% to the OAG and 40% to the coordinating board. So we got a little bit of a higher take on the backside, essentially the collections that are had, but we are paying a little bit more on the front side. The net effect of all of these from a operating expense standpoint is that we have a little bit of higher operating expense in our FY12 operating budget, but we're expecting from a revenue standpoint a higher revenue stream as a result of this particular agreement, which doesn't necessarily show up in the operating budget, but it does show up in our other financial statements. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Dennis, just for you and Joe, and I think, Joe, you were also involved in this. I think this, if I remember the numbers, has resulted in increase of $1 million in collections. That wasn't $1 million in attorney's fees, $1 million in enhanced collections.
It's both. We've been tracking our collections on our litigation portfolio since 2007. The first 2 years, which was kind of the informal agreement with the OAG, pull out the actual numbers, it might be helpful. We collected $3.8 million in fiscal year 08, $3.5 million in fiscal year 09. We made this transition in November of 2009, so it'd be reflected in fiscal year 10. We collected $4.6 million in fiscal year 10, so about $1.2 million higher in collection from litigating accounts. We're on track this year to collect about $5 million within the same snapshot of students that we started tracking in fiscal year 08. So that's the borrower side of the payments that were due to the coordinating board. The other side are the attorney's fees that are assessed to the particular borrowers, which historically have been, I guess, de minimis. I don't want to use a legal term. Anyway, they've been revamped. They are graduated based on the value of the loan. They are assessed to the borrower, and when the borrower makes repayments to the coordinating board, that's the 60-40 split that I talked about, where the OAG captures 60% and then we capture the other 40%. So that would be an additional potential revenue that would be reflected in our numbers going forward.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, could I have a motion for approval of the committee's recommendation regarding this interagency contract as presented and agenda item 9F?
So moved.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign. That concludes the report on agency ops, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. We're going to have lunch, so we are not going to adjourn. We'll have to officially come back out and adjourn the meeting. But other than us eating, there's going to be no further business. So you can sit out here and wait if you'd like to. But thank you all very much for attending, particularly Joe. Whit, we're going to miss you both. Let's have lunch. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, we are officially adjourned.